Okay. Good morning. This is the Pennington County Planning Commission meeting for September 9th, 2024. Recommendations of the Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda will be considered by the Board of Commissioners at their regular meeting on September 19th, 2024, beginning at 10:30 a.m. The Planning Commission utilizes speaker request forms, which are available in the commission chambers during the meeting, and those forms are at the back of the room in one of the bookcases. Roll call. Jerry, it looks like everybody's here. Has everyone received the minutes
Yes.
and reviewed? Okay.
Yes.
Move to approve the minutes of August 26, 2024.
Second.
The motion has been made to approve the minutes of August 26, 2024. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Approval of agenda. The chair would address a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as presented. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Consent agenda. Brittany.
Good morning, Commissioners. Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of this Planning Commission on certain items from this agenda are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners, who will make the final decision. Item number 4 is conditional use permit review CUR 1505 for Beach House LLC to review a vacation home rental in a rural residential district, and staff recommends approval. Item number 5 is conditional use permit review CUR 1827 for John and Vicki Hansen to review a recreational vehicle to be used for no more than 180 calendar days on the subject property, and to also allow a carport to cover a recreational vehicle in a rural residential district, and staff recommends approval. Item number 6 is conditional use permit review CUR 2329 for Joy Johnson and Errol Flynn to review a home occupation to make and sell ceramics in a rural residential district, and staff recommends approval.
Would staff like any of these items removed?
No, none at this time.
Okay. Would any of the board members like any of these items removed? Okay. Would anyone from the public like any of these items removed from the consent agenda? Okay. The chair would address a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as submitted. And any discussion from the
Yes,
board?
I've got one, there's a clerical error, I think, and I don't know, I gotta look to see who the staff is. It's Christine. I think it's on page 4 of number 4. Up on the top, they're showing the permits, building permits, and I think they either wanted 28 feet by 64 on the second permit, or they're reversed, one or the other, because you don't, the picture shows that it's a double wide. So the last print, you see what I mean? It probably was 28, you think they put a 28 in place of the 24?
Yes, and I'll double check that.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out, we should have that clear before we vote on it. Thank you, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
so are we ready to proceed?
Got to vote?
Yeah.
I hung you up, I'm sorry.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as submitted. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Cody.
Cody Sack, environmental planner. Item 7 is conditional use permit COCU 24-0027. It's to allow animal sporting events on the subject property. The applicant and owner is David and Angela Dorn. Location of the property is 5100 143rd Avenue. Staff is going to recommend to continue conditional use permit COCU 24-0027 to the October 16th, 2024 Board or Planning Commission meeting to allow the applicants time to bring the property into compliance by obtaining approved building permits for the 4 unpermitted structures and to obtain approach permits.
So moved. You'll move, okay. Is there a second on this item?
Second.
To continue? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Item number 8.
Megan Talmadge, planner. Agenda item number 8 is minor plat CO MPL 24-0002, and it's to subdivide and create Lot 3 and 4 of Bonita subdivision. The applicant and property owner are Morris and Bruce Evans. This is located at 1388-3 Neck Yoke Road. This property is going to be subdivided into 2 lots. Lot 3 and 4, both 10 acres, and a remaining balance of approximately 31 acres. It's currently zoned agriculture. There's no special flood hazard on the property. In the interdepartmental review, the County Highway Department did return comments. Those have been actually resolved with the surveyor. Staff recommends approval of this item with 4 conditions.
Thank you. Are there questions for Megan? Is there anyone in the audience that has questions or wants to speak on this item? The chair would address the motion.
Move to approve per staff's recommendation, COMPL 24-0002 with 4 conditions.
Conditions.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9.
Agenda item number 9 is Major Plan Unit Development Amendment, COPU 24-0006. It's to amend an existing plan unit development to add 2 cabins and 2 recreational vehicle spots. The owner and applicant are J&A Recreation, Justin Bueller. This is located at 12720 South Highway 16. There is 100-year special flood hazard on the property. Staff recommends approval of major plan unit development amendment, and there is a correction in condition number 1. There should be 4 detached cabins rather than 2. There were no major comments in the interdepartmental review, but a floodplain development permit will be needed for any work done within the floodplain development permit. 2 of the recreational vehicle sites and 1 of the proposed cabins are in the floodplain. Previously on this planned unit development, there was a 4-plex that was allowed. Staff removed it to make room for laundry facilities. The owner is proposing to separate the laundry into its own gray water tank so that they have the capacity for the cabins and the RV sites. Again, staff recommends approval with 25 conditions.
Are there questions?
21 conditions, my apologies.
Are there questions for Megan?
I have one.
Yes, Michael.
This is not far from where we live. I'm very familiar with the flood area. The 2 RV sites are one thing, but a cabin right in the middle. Is this going to be built differently or what?
They'll have to go through the floodplain development permit process, which would ensure that they are at or above base flood elevation. Whether that concerns bringing in fill, what exactly they need will be dependent upon what their engineer is going to require.
Okay, all right. Well, that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Are there other questions on this item?
No, but I would like to make a comment. For years, I've driven by this location. Whoever is the operator right now has done an excellent job as far as making it look very pleasant from the road versus what wasn't always quite as presentable an image for years at this location. So I think that has to be part of the record too for the operator. They've done an excellent job of presenting themselves and us up there in that neighborhood. We drive by it a lot. They've done a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the comment.
Are you Justin?
Yes.
I have a speaker form for Justin, so,
I mean, if
You-
there's
you're-
any questions, I can answer questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think.
are there any further questions or questions for the operator? No? The chair would address a motion on this item.
I'll move for approval of Major Planned Unit Development Amendment, COPU 24-0006,
Second.
with conditions.
With conditions. It's been moved and seconded
21.
to approve COPU 24-0006 with 21 conditions. Any further discussion on this item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Ordinance Amendment OA 24-10.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ordinance Amendment OA 24-10 is to amend Section 324 accessory dwellings. The main reason for this amendment is because in the vacation home rental ordinance in 319, when it was approved, it did allow vacation home rentals and ADUs, so we needed to update this section of the ordinance to reflect that change. So on Section B9 there, it says that vacation home rental in accordance with Section 319, and it was removed from the prohibitions. So with that, staff is recommending approval of Ordinance Amendment 24-10.
Are there questions for Brittany?
I got a question for Brittany. Does this mean an accessory dwelling could be on a particular piece of property your house is already on, correct?
Correct.
And you can put an accessory dwelling out there, get that approved, and now we're gonna allow them to have, we're gonna allow everybody then to have our vacation home rental on their place. That's what we're saying.
In the accessory dwelling, yes, it is in Section 319. However, what the main structure has to be owner occupied or a long-term rental. So you couldn't have two vacation home rentals because then that puts it more into a specialty resort or a recreational resort type. So one of them has to be a long-term rental or owner occupied. So only one of the structures, if they have an ADU, can be a vacation home rental.
Okay.
So you could have a long-term rental and a vacation home rental, you just couldn't have two vacation home rentals.
Okay.
'Cause
I
that would
guess-
put it into the
I guess
specialty
where I'm
resort.
coming from is then basically we're saying people with enough property. And we did away with the 1 acre, right?
Correct.
Can all have an extra room on the accessory dwelling if we approve it. And then make it a vacation home rental.
Correct.
Not sure I agree with that, but that's all right. I'm not sure a lot of neighbors would agree with that.
It was in the vacation home rental ordinance that would allow
kind of.
ADUs, so right now it conflicts, so that's what the reasoning for this
We
amendment.
allowed ADUs, but I think people understood it that that would be an ADU that was on a property as on a standalone.
Well, that would be an efficiency dwelling.
Yes, that's right. We play games with the words.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm just expressing, I think there's a number of Pennington County people that are not in agreement with that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Brittany? From the audience? Okay. The chair would address a motion on Ordinance Amendment OA 24-10.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve OA 24-10. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Got that, Jerry? Okay.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we discuss agenda items number 11 and 12 together, but vote on them separately.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to discuss item 11 and 12, which is COCU 24-0022 and COCU 24-0023 together, but vote on them separately. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right.
All right, items number 11 and 12, COCU 24-0022 and COCU 24-0023 were continued from the July 22nd, 2024 Planning Commission meeting, and the applicants are here and will give a presentation, an updated presentation on this item. So with that, I believe Mark Tippett and Lenny Roth will be.
Thank you, Brittany.
Please introduce yourself again.
Sure, my name is Lyon Roth, I'm the chairman of Yarrowtech, chairman and co-founder. Madam Chair, Commissioner Hadcock, other members of the planning committee, I was here on July 22nd and we went through a much longer presentation. I think that unless you want us to go through that again, we have a much shorter version of the slides. Just a brief update, I think a lot of you probably know this, but since July 22nd, we had a town hall meeting in North Underwood. My colleague and the company's chief development officer, Mark Tippett, Mark, you want to join me at the podium? He presented to folks from the neighborhood and had a spirited discussion about some of the themes and topics that came up. I know that, Planning Commissioner Johnson, you asked some questions about the whole recycling process and the transportation costs, and we fixed that typo that we both talked about regarding, the difference between the wind turbines and the solar panels. Turns out, and Mark can take a deeper dive, there are actually some facilities not far away from where we are that actually have quite a bit of expertise in this. And once again, this process, the decommissioning process, would take place no earlier than 30 years from when this is up and running, so it's hard to predict what the technology and what the transportation might look like in that time, 2057, 2060. But at the very least, we know that there is that process. We've had conversations with the Public Utility Commission. We've engaged other members of the community, and we feel this is an important part of the process. And I think that when we were alerted to the fact that there were some concerns about notification and neighbors, and we've talked to some of the neighbors on the property, and we have learned from what some of our predecessors have done, the Wild Spring Solar Project. We prepared, and I'll ask Mark to go into this in just a few minutes, something that we believe is targeted to the issues and understanding of what it is we want to do, where we want to do it, how big it's going to be on what tract of land, and obviously we remain open to your feedback. I think that we've worked closely with Brittany and Jason and following what's actually an exceptional ordinance that the county has regarding these projects. We've learned a lot from the process, and we're enthusiastic to keep communicating with all of you so we can understand even better how we can move this forward in a way that makes as many people feel as comfortable as possible. So with your permission, we'll dive into this presentation. It's a much shorter one, just a few slides. Okay. And Mark,
Certainly.
and then we'll be very happy, obviously, to answer all your questions.
I'm Mark Tippett with Yarrowtech. Thank you for having us today. There were in the community engagement meeting several weeks ago. There were a lot of things that came up, a lot of good points. Being one individual, I feel like some of them I answered well and some of them I didn't answer well. So hopefully we'll correct a few of the latter in this presentation. I didn't know if I came out of presentation mode. One thing that we thought was really important to try and do this time is maybe set some more specific, information on the project location, size, things like that. So this map shows the project location with respect to Rapid City, but also with respect to New Underwood. So just wanted to make sure that it's very clear from a location perspective where we are. This slide kind of addresses a few questions about how the project connects to the power transmission grid, where that connection is with respect to New Underwood and the New Underwood substation, where the electricity goes, once it's generated. So starting from the bottom, the project would connect to the WAPA 230 kV line, which is the orange line to the left going north and south. That connection path would be along section lines according to the county process. And we have communicated with the Department of Transportation, and they said, there's nothing unusual here, that the details of that connection would be done once we're through this part of the process. It would be up to the county whether that connection was underground or above ground. We could do it either way. The second thing to kind of point out is this really is the closest path to get the power into the New Underwood substation. So the power would, much like water, it flows in both directions, but the closest substation by far is the New Underwood substation. And then you can see from the other transmission lines radiating out of the substation, then those would be other paths that the power would go. But the first offtake of the power is going to be in the New Underwood community. It's basically the closest electricity demand from the point that it hits the grid. What we wanted to make sure to communicate with this slide is the panel on the left shows the 3 parcels that are included in the project on the Cheyenne River Ranch, and then the panel on the right shows the adjacent landowners. So there are on 2 of the 3 sides. On 2 of the 4 sides, the adjacent land is additional Cheyenne River Ranch land, but on the north and a little bit to the east is Mr. Mader, and to the west is Mr. Shorb. I'm going to just be on this site plan very shortly. This is a site plan that came. This is one of the engineering sheets, but then I'm going to come down to something much more simplified, which shows the layout of the project. So one of the things that I caused some confusion about the last time was 300 acres roughly versus 1,000. And because I didn't have something like this up above, I was referring to the project entire site, which is 1,000. But the mistake that I was making was the solar panels themselves are laid out on 331 acres. So the solar panels take up 331 acres. There are wind turbines on two sides, on the north and on the east. And then, according to the county ordinance, there are minimum setback requirements for solar, but then there are also minimum setback requirements for wind, which are much more extensive. One of the corrections that we made is in the last meeting, the wind setback was 900 feet, and that has now been corrected to 1,000. So there are 1,000-foot buffers from the edge of the project site, and then depending on the side, it's much longer because it's just going onto Cheyenne River Ranch land. So hopefully this is a much clearer depiction of the project and the project organization. And I will, if somebody has a question that they want to ask while this is up, please let us know. If not, I'll run through the remaining slides and then we can take the questions from there. One of the other area of questions is the project access. And so again, here are two panels. The panel on the right shows that all of the land that includes the access is Cheyenne River Ranch land. The access road is an existing internal road that goes across Cheyenne River Ranch land off of 44. So the access to the project would be off of 44 and then immediately onto a road contained on Cheyenne River Ranch and would approach the project from the south. So there is no right-of-way easements or crossings required by other landowners, from other landowners. This, so as Mr. Roth mentioned, we did correct the sign on one of the two, the table that shows the total of either wind or solar recycling and decommissioning. One of the things that we spent quite a bit of time researching is the distance at decommissioning to take either solar panels or wind. In green, these are not all of the recycling centers in South Dakota. There's certainly 5 of the bigger ones. All of these recycling centers would accept metal from the wind turbines. So the wind turbines are predominantly metal except for the blades. And they would also accept the steel from the solar panel mounting racks and the aluminum from the solar panels themselves. And then the spots in blue are landfills that would take the material from the blades. The big clarifier, that might have been missing is the blades are cut up. The blades are made of fiberglass, and they're, currently in today's technology, there is not a really good way to recycle fiberglass. There are some ways, but what would happen with the blades is they would be cut up and they would be put in just regular construction trucks, dump trucks, and then taken to any of these landfill sites.
I want to interject here again, because that's true, and these are conversations in state-of-the-art technology in September of 2024. There are a lot of really, good engineers who are working on material sciences, especially with respect to the blades of the turbines, to construct them in a way that are just as efficient, just as durable, but friendlier from a recycling standpoint. That's sort of the bigger challenge. And again, we're talking about comparing this snapshot in 2024 with what the world may look like 30, 35 years from now. What was very important for us after particularly the interchange that we had, Commissioner Johnson, was to make sure that this doesn't have to be shipped. And we don't, but if it happened today, none of this would have to incur those prohibitive transportation costs that we thought might be the case. Bless you. So those are the two things I'd want to emphasize. One is between now and construction, there is a reasonable expectation that the materials may be eco-friendlier than they are now just on the turbines that are now made of fiberglass. And whenever the decommission process takes place, we'll be looking at an extremely different technological landscape.
Thank you.
The last slide is just a restatement of our targeted timeline. The long pole in the tent by far is the interconnection study. That takes, by Southwest Power Pool, about 3 years on average. And we are, we are at the point for conditional use permitting. So I think the thing to, point out here is there are lots and lots of studies and permits that are ahead. Most of them are at the state level. These have to do with stormwater, stormwater management, and lots of other things. We were contacted by PUC, and even in the community engagement meeting, we have a PUC regulation on our, we've put that on the list. We're assuming that this would be something that they would want to, review and potentially provide a permit on. There is, they are still investigating this themselves because these are two projects, really, because the solar ordinance is one ordinance and because the wind ordinance is another ordinance, and both of them are specific to those types of generation. They are essentially two projects which exist on the same piece of land. It will be the PUC's decision. Each of those individually falls beneath the limit for the regulation. We didn't do that, as some slight. It's just the way that the two components sized out. But it was a very positive conversation, and if we are expecting to work with the PUC on permitting this project, which is 142 megawatts total.
Does the board have questions?
Just one question on that. If those get turned into one project, does that give PUC a lot more control over it? Is that?
So we're assuming that they already do. In other words, the conversation with the PUC, and this was after, I believe, some of the comments that Mr. Durr made at the previous planning meeting, is that the PUC, along with the other permits, the interconnection, Southwest Power, these are sanity checks on this entire project. In other words, there are lots of additional milestones that this project is going to engage over the next 3 years to make sure that everything is in compliance with the Public Utilities Commission, with stormwater issues, with every aspect that regulates both solar and wind projects.
So,
Chair,
I'm sorry.
go ahead,
Michael?
Mike.
The, the line that you've got an 8-foot or 8-mile line going across, and then you're going up to New Underwood. When it gets up to New Underwood, does it get in another larger line, or does it dump into local, like Black Hills Power and Light?
It hits basically the electrical bus. So every transmission line that comes into New Underwood, you know, it's like a water main that comes into a water distribution. So wherever there is a demand, the line coming across the top is a 115 kV line. That's the one the other solar project is connected to.
Oh.
So basically, it's wherever there is demand, that's where the electricity flows.
I mean, the good news is that New Underwood gets it first.
Yeah.
So in the event that there's some sort of dearth of power in the region, then New Underwood receives that power first, and if they don't need it, then it would get then diverted to other places. It could go north to Ellsworth Air Force Base, it could go, west to Rapid City. That really is, as Mark said, depending on the demand components as the power is being generated.
One other thing, you've got 164th Avenue. Now, that's the road going up.
Yeah, so if we go back to that slide, we took that reference off, because that's not 164th Avenue.
It's actually,
That's what I was
it's an internal road, and
Yes.
we benefited from a conversation where we just checked again, and it's an internal road that doesn't have a name.
So it's not public at all?
No.
Yeah, and in fact, the package that we sent you last week, there's already a new version that has that taken off.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie?
My question is for Mark. You indicated in regards to your accesses across neighbors' property. During the construction phase, you're going to have a lot of deliveries, a lot of weighted trucks. I assume, and you haven't worked out your haul agreement with the county yet. That is part of the submission, and I understand it, and I tried to find in all these pages what the county highway department replied, but we call it standard 14 on the road. Do you, in your delivery process during construction, you still don't cross anybody else's property to get to yours?
Yes, sir, that's correct, yes.
Okay.
And in working with the county Department of Transportation, we had thought that there would be something that we would have on record, but what they told us was they don't spend their resources, on that. They said, we don't see any issue with the project, and everything that has been communicated here is in compliance with their process and their procedures, but they said, we don't spend time working on it until it has been approved. So it just, keeps them from,
Correct.
Yeah.
And besides that, we're very selective on what roads we're maintaining, and I'm sure that's going to fall into question too, what sort of road delivery routes you have to take during construction. So I agree, but all I wanted to make sure that you don't cross anybody else's property that you're going to have to develop and then meet this.
That's correct.
Haul agreement.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then my last thing is, I'm not sure I'm still on board with your decommissioning plans. And I agree with you. It's tough to look in that crystal ball and say what's going to happen with 20 years, 25, 40. But I don't think just looking at today, South Dakota has transportation problems on recycling materials. I went around and talked to a number of individuals that are in the recycling around here, and we don't have a very extensive acceptance level around here for materials.
So
we're very limited.
So I heard that, and I hear it again, and obviously you live here. I can only share what we learned as part of your comments. I was actually impressed. We were impressed and pleasantly surprised because we expected to find very little, if anything at all. And there is not just an ability, but there's a level of sophistication that ranks right up there with things that we've heard in other states that are perhaps considered to be further advanced when it comes. They understood the materials, they understood the components, they understood what goes into solar panels and inverters and stands and tracking, and they understood all the components of the wind turbines and the towers and the blades, and frankly, we were pleased to learn that. And again, this is
I
2024.
think you're correct, but the one item that comes out again and again in those conversations, and I just look at your steel price versus what I can drive in and get for a steel price, it all has to do with transportation, even steel. That they regularly recycle, aluminum, they regularly recycle. We have but I have to point out that a lot of the trucks that come here and service this area either have to deadhead to get here, that's in that pricing.
Yeah.
The steel pricing you guys are at in this report is far from what I would receive from steel pricing, even on clean. I know the difference between delivering them a clean load and a dirty load.
Right, so we went back actually to our engineering firm and asked the same question, because the transportation is not just what it costs to get it to the recycling plant, but once they have it, how much are they going to?
That price you're gonna get for it because they pay transportation.
Right, so how competitive is that going to be? And again, it sounds to me like you really know this business. We know it as well as we do, but we asked for a sanity check, and we were told that the numbers, again, it's hard to predict. I like that term, crystal ball, what the world will look like in 35 years from now. But the answers that we got are what we put in the study, and they've been vetted. I hope, frankly, that these projects last longer. I hope that people then look at the world in 2050, whatever it is, and say, well, this is good, and let's keep doing it and use the technology that will exist then. But if all we can do is take a snapshot of where we are right now, after doing the homework that you encouraged us to do, we're pleased that this level of sophistication exists so close to home.
I gotta throw in, though, I think your advisors consider me just a little guy in a little cog in South Dakota, and I think the rose-covered glasses are obscuring what you're looking at for recycling.
What we will do next is we will drop down to the next level of detail so that we're actually getting information from these sites, to find out, hey, this is what our assumption is for the recycled steel value, and if they say that's way over the top, then we're going to document that. So
Okay.
it's still an outstanding question, and we will, we'll keep our shoulder, to the grindstone to produce
I thank you
more
for
detailed
providing
information.
me those sites now, because I'm gonna look
Okay.
at them. I only had this since Thursday, so.
And so, by the way, and we learned this because of your feedback, so thank you for that. And another kind of point of comfort, I talked about all the other permits we're gonna have to get. The assumptions that we make in the decommissioning bond have to be reviewed every 5 years.
Yes,
So I can
that
throw
is
out
correct.
2055, 2060, but in 2028, and 2033, and 2038, and 2043, whatever the migrations and trends and the steel prices and transportation, the deadheading, those things will change. Hopefully they change in our favor, but they may not. And therefore, what we post gets tweaked throughout the life of the project.
I read into that our commissioners really think the financial end of it's very critical too, so they want to look at it every 5 years
And-
on this stuff. So I agree with
And
you.
we're committed to that.
Yeah, that is a good cycle, and there's a lot of areas do not have call for that, and I agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Michael?
Another one. I'm not sure if this is for you or for Brittany. Your footprint is 331 acres. Everything goes gangbusters and you want to expand. Do you get to go past the 331? Or the way we're doing this, 331 is it, and if you have to come back to the well to expand?
So this is what I understand from the previous conversation. Obviously, I welcome Brittany's feedback. I think she was very relevant in the last meeting as well. The overall parcel that we're asking for permission to build on is 1,100 acres.
Right.
The current schematic looks at 331 acres of solar panels. We're asking for approval to go up to 200 megawatts in total. The total projected size of this project is 142.8, 143 megawatts. What I understand is if our conditional use permit is granted, we are able to build within that parcel, the 1,100, not the 331, and we're able to build up to 200, not just the 142.8, without seeking additional approval. To the extent that we want to exceed those parameters, either with respect to capacity or with respect to footprint, we would need to come back and get your approval. Did I get that right? Okay.
Just to clarify that, above the 200 is
Yes,
what
sir.
you're saying? Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Yes.
Could you put the map up again with the recycling and landfill
yes,
facilities,
yes, ma'am.
please? Thank you.
Further
Am I
down,
going the right way?
further down.
I think it's further down.
They all start to jumble together.
Green is recycling, blue is landfill.
Yeah.
There it is.
So the landfill facilities are larger regional ones?
Yeah, yes, those are, I mean, I had a map before that showed about 100 dots in South Dakota, but, upon research, probably 90% of those are, just take
Small
cans
towns,
and
Bottles and
bottles,
paper and
yeah,
stuff
so,
like that.
so,
These are the industrial sites that we looked at.
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Chairman,
Yes.
so I've been to a planning commission on this, and then I went to the community meeting in New Underwood. I'll just tell you, I think you confused me more than actually on what you're doing and what is the overall plan. I mean, I could read the book, but I'm not an engineer to figure out some of this stuff. Decommissioning, I understand. I went to also the Wild Spring a couple times, just to figure out, basically about solar, not just panels, but there was a young man there that actually worked with wind turbines, and that's what he did before. So it was very informational for a lot of us that wanted to go out. I took some of the community with me so they'd have an understanding how a presentation should be done, how a presentation should not make you fearful or feel like you didn't get the answers you needed when you were done. You could ask them anything they wanted, and they told us up straight about everything, and then actually went on a tour and showed us what was going on. So when they did the overview, they did a slideshow on everything they did, how they do it, even on their buildings, their connection lines, where their substations were, how they worked with the ranchers, the farmers, even their mowing. They detailed everything. The setbacks, the visual barriers, construction management plans, stormwater erosion, we asked them everything. Tax treatment, we did not ask them that. Project timeline, they told us how long their timeline was, how long it took. Project benefits to the community was about 15,000 houses. So far, I've listened to 3 presentations, and even on this one, we never followed the plan on what you were showing to figure out your bottom line on all of this. So if you read through the book, I guess you can get all kinds of information, but when you do a plan and people in the audience don't have this whole book, they need to know exactly in detail, and I had told you that, Lion, of what really is happening. So if you're doing a Cheyenne River Ranch project overview, show the ranch, show the project, show where everything's going on that project, show the people that actually took the time out to go to a meeting. The community engagement meeting, I wasn't impressed. I'll just tell you, Mark, you weren't answering questions, you were circling around the questions. Some of the questions weren't yours, I understand, but some of this, you had a whole book to refer to, and then a meeting where your community came up beforehand to engage with. Those were the same people you engaged with that night, and I don't think any questions were answered. I think, in fact, you keep confusing me because first it's 8,000 houses, then it's 15,000, or it's 10,000, and then pretty soon there's for the Decommissioning, we asked about decommissioning. They take their panels, and their companies actually take their panels back. They don't have to, they recycle them for them. And they use those panels because they usually don't get busted up bad enough where they can't recycle them. So they don't have to take them to the landfills. So some of the answers are pretty vague for me to, and I think the community, in order to approve that this is going to be a prosperous and a project that will follow through in everything it does with all its plans. So I don't know about the planning commission, but I think there needs to be a more of a thorough going through on some of this stuff and like I said, stormwater and erosion plan, that's huge for the community. It's huge for those areas being by Cheyenne River. It's huge to have people listen to how that plan is gonna go. Because you do a STIP project, and that STIP project is great. They don't know that, and they don't know why and where and how that's gonna work. Construction management plan, how's those trucks gonna go through their community? That's an 8-mile stretch. That 8-mile stretch, doesn't it have to carry that voltage of 142? I thought there had to be a permit for that 142 because it goes from the areas, like on the 347,000 panels, they have 6 connecting lines to their substation that they have, their smallest substation, and then the big transmission lines carry it across the street in that area. On this, we have no idea. We're just saying, well, we have this plan. What happens with the turbines and the wind area and the solar panels? How do those connect? How do those transfer that electricity into what it does, into a transfer box, into a transformer that goes into a bigger small substation that goes to a bigger substation? What the problem is for me is, if you've never done this and you've never seen this, that's why people get fearful. They're fearful of what you're doing, and that's very vague, so then it makes them more fearful of what you're talking about. For me to have to go out there and look, and I had to do it twice to get the whole picture. Since I've been watching this, I'm fearful as well because I've asked you twice to detail it more, and we still have Mark, and even the presentation today wasn't like followed through or detailed. Then it was just some couple of questions from our board. This is a huge project. This is a huge project for this community. It's a huge project for the ranching community out there that they think is going to be a disturbance. How do we calm that disturbance? By not answering questions, by not answering full and complete areas of setbacks, barriers, and just, I mean, they're going to speak today, so you'll see some of that, but to me, I've been in here a long time, and this is the most vague project I've seen for a discussion from the people that actually do it for a living. They actually asked Mark if that day, and that really threw me over the edge. They asked, so you do a lot of these projects? Yep. How many have done like this? We do lots of projects. No, this is your first hybrid. In fact, I asked the guy that was at the Wild Springs, how many projects have you seen with turbines and panels? He said, there's not very many. He said they usually don't combine them. He didn't say there was a problem with it. He said they just usually don't do it. The turbines don't put out enough power compared to the panels to even do turbine projects. That's pretty much around this area. So,
Commissioner
anyway.
Hadcock, do you have questions specifically?
No,
'Cause
actually,
I have
why
a
I'm saying that
lot of-
is, the question is, ma'am, is when people ask you about decommissioning setback and visuals, and you do a presentation, we probably have a lot more questions, but we have to understand it first. And that's my point of all of this. It's hard to ask a lot of questions when you don't have details of what's really happening on slides. So maybe I'm wrong.
Madam Chair, can I respond to some of the comments that I heard, though? Commissioner, thank you for your feedback, and I'm saying this sincerely because we've had an opportunity to engage a couple of times over the past few months, and I want to address some of the important points that you bring up right now. So you're comparing us to Wild Springs, and actually, not insignificantly motivated by your encouragement, we did a deeper dive in terms of what they presented, when they presented it, what timeline they anticipated, what actually happened. We've learned from other folks some of the glitches that took place during the process. This idea of recycling their own panels, we would certainly do that. I just want to make one thing clear, because you brought up a lot of points, hopefully I will remember as many as possible. If we decide, let's say on an ongoing basis, that they're better panels, some have been degraded, some had hailstones come and knock them down and had to be replaced, we have all those abilities. Decommissioning to us means restore it back to what it was. Send it back to 2024 and what that entails. The recycling of the panels, the replacement of turbines, all of that is part and parcel of what operators in the renewable space do. And I'm not comparing ourselves to National Grid. They're a larger company, but we've been doing that. We've been doing that in Puerto Rico. We sustained some damage during Hurricane Maria, and everything that you just talked about has taken place. The decommissioning is really just an absolute restoration to the status quo ante. The other things, and I apologize for not having a primer on actually how solar power works. I think that's something that we could share with you. I know that Wild Springs did it. The science and the engineering is important, I think, but the actual topography and the points that you raised about helping the ranchers and other folks in the room understand where does this start, where does this go, the questions that were asked about access, whose roads, whose land will be disrupted. So Mr. Sherb's land will have some of that transmission that goes from the generation source to the transmission line, but that is not where any of the construction, just so people understand from an employment, from a people standpoint, during the construction phase, there'll be about 100 people working on the construction. That takes several months. After that, it's really a much, much smaller group. The operating expenses related to one of these is really minimal. We're not selling this as a perpetual employment opportunity for Pennington County. There will be some people employed, but that's not a meaningful number. Regarding the offsets, and actually in the last presentation, we always had a 1,000 foot. The ordinance says 900. We had some redundancy in there. So I feel that if this doesn't make it clear to you what we're doing, where we're doing it, how we're doing it, so maybe it's on us to tweak it a little bit, but it's precisely the things that you feel are not satisfactory that we attempted to address in terms of helping people explain that it's not going over their land. The transmission could go underground or overground, depending on what the county decides and what they tell us to do, and we're comfortable with either approach to that. It would be Mr. Sherb's land that would go over. Regarding the community engagement and the commitment to work together with the school district or any other of the stakeholders, we are equally committed to do all of that. The timeline, first of all, if using Wild Spring as a reference point, they came to this process a little later in the game. They had worked on getting some of their other permits first. There's no magic formula as to what you lead with regarding interconnection, then conditional use, or conditional use and then interconnection. Clearly, all the things that you mentioned regarding stormwater and Cheyenne River, and these are really important points. And we would like to tell you that we're very responsible. We're not going to do anything that would jeopardize the safety or the well-being or of the land. But it's not our decision. It's the other regulators, the Public Utility Commission. It's the state of South Dakota that's going to make sure that we sharpen our pencils, dot our I's, cross our T's, and ensure that at every step along the way, in the slide that Mark showed, we're here in September of 2024. This is not going to be up and running producing power till at best late 27, early 28. The folks who came here from Wild Springs, it was then called Geronimo, were a little bit more optimistic. They were also further along in the process. They appeared in front of this commission a little over 4 years ago. They were here in the summer of 2020, and they got up and running in April of 2024 after having done, like I said, a little bit more than we've already done. So it's not likely that it'll take us significantly fewer than 4 years, and a lot of things are going to happen in those 4 years with us working in conjunction with the stakeholders and the regulators to make sure that some of the things that you feel have to happen. And that's just where we are on the runway between getting a conditional use permit from the county, and then having the other engagements and the other investments and the other studies that are imperative, they're prerequisites for this to be up and running. And I do want to answer your questions, and I do want you to leave here with the level of satisfaction that the clarity is at a standard that you demand and deserve.
So, can I ask, so Lion, did they have, meaning the other solar company, did they have their permits, a lot of their permits before they started?
They didn't have permits. They had additional studies
Like the
on.
HEPA studies and stuff like that done?
So they chose to have some interconnection studies done in advance. And like I said, if you go back to the timeline and see where they were some things that they chose to do sooner before investing and getting into a conditional use permit. None of those things can happen. In other words, most people get a conditional use permit first. They chose to do some of those studies first, but that was also in 2020, 2019. Right now, if you look at the way renewable projects are done, and because of the increased costs of some of these other studies, because of the backlog, they become more expensive. The investment is a lot higher. We're happy to make those investments, but pretty much every renewable company now, 5 years later, wants at least the backstop of knowing that they have a conditional use permit before investing the sums that are required to get some of those other things in place.
I think sometimes it's imperative, as you say, to make sure you can get some of those, for me, to show that you have due diligence on that project beforehand, before coming for a conditional use. That's probably why they did it on some of their studies, to prove that they were above and beyond what they were doing, and what they were doing is permitted and was permitted based on their kind of business. So maybe that's.
One other
that's second,
comment
but-
about the efficiency of timing is until the details of a conditional use permit are understood, a lot of times these studies have to just be redone because something changed and the project that got approved is not the project that got studied. And so they just throw away, everything that had been done. Our primary focus is the ordinances.
Bless you.
Making sure that we are providing the information and in compliance with the things that are detailed in two very well-written ordinances, and we see them from all over the country. So those are our primary targets, up to this stage.
So I'll answer that question. So this is for your land use, basically, to allow utility solar energy system. So it's nothing that you wouldn't have to do already, meaning this is the land use on it. Conditional use is to allow utility solar energy on ag.
Yes.
So I guess to be prepared for that and to say it could be shut down, if you're leasing the land, I understand some of that's going to cost you money, but it also makes it, if it's kind of like a feasibility study.
So that's exactly how I would call it. Thank you for that. And, you had your reflections on that, big book that maybe allows for an opportunity to communicate more clearly, but I hope, at the very least, that you're impressed with the amount of work and diligence and studies from a preliminary standpoint, a feasibility standpoint, to make sure that the land is, that's actually how we got into the solar wind, because we realized that some portion of the land, we're looking at maps, but folks who live here, these are giant tracts of land. There's an area where the sun, gets less cloud cover. There's an area that gets more wind. It's kind of nice if you think about it. You don't need to be a scientist. It's not always sunny and windy at the same time, and especially if you're talking at night, it's never sunny and it's often windier. So we've invested a lot of money working with our partners on the engineering side, on the topographical side, to give you what it seems. I mean, you're the reader, you're the audience. What seems could be clearer, at least in a way that you'd find a little bit more accessible. But from a content standpoint, I hope you're impressed that a lot of work went into this before we asked Brittany and Jason to come before you and your colleagues and present this.
I appreciate that line. The main thing is you're not making it just clear for me, you're making it for the people around you. In the last two meetings, that's why I said, And I tell people, and maybe that sounds silly, 101 dummies, whether it's for commissioners, including myself, on how this works. I've seen it before, so I can understand it a little bit more. People in the audience are living around this. So we have to comply, as at least our commissioners and hopefully the Planning Commission, with what the needs are for the community and what they think is going to happen or what's going to happen. Like I said, it needs to be a clear understanding for them as well as us. So, like I said, you could have done better on the clearing things up and understanding of what the community needed out there. I've been on this community east before, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of questions, and they care about their community a whole lot. Not that anybody else doesn't, but when I go to meetings, usually community meetings, there's like 9 or 10 people showed up. You had like 60, and you have to be prepared for that. And you have to be prepared to answer the questions instead of read from the paper that you put out. They don't understand that. Slideshows and things like that. So it's not just for me, it's for our community and to make sure that people aren't fearful or anything. Because I think also, you going out there and doing these companies, I think these solar wind project, and you have a community that's not behind it, it's going to cause a lot more issues than what we think. So that was the main reason why I said that. It wasn't for just Deb, it was for people to understand this project.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's why we're here today.
Okay, I have a number of speaker request forms. Are there any more questions from the commission? Okay. Eileen Peterson?
Madam Chair, would you like us to stay up here or sit down?
No.
Okay.
No.
My name is Eileen Peterson, and the first comments that come from landholder Seth Shorb.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Okay, Eileen Peterson. First comments I have are from Seth Shorb, one of the adjacent landholders who couldn't be here. I'm Seth Shorb, an adjacent landholder of the proposed project, and have several concerns. I did arrange a schedule to attend the August 26th hearing, which turned out not to have been held, but he couldn't get out of an out-of-state commitment he had for today. First of all, he would like whoever on the commission is in charge of this to stop using his physical address in the public notices that went out, the ones that were in the newspaper. They all say that this project is northeast of his address. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want his address associated with this project. He suggests you use the actual address for the property that this project is on. He's had a news channel from Rapid City come out to his property, filming his home, his property, his grandmother's property, as being associated favorably with this project. He's getting kickback from people who want to know why he's supporting this, and he is not supporting this.
Thank you.
And I have that address if you do not, for the land.
Planning apparently has it.
I would hope so. The project overview and development application documents provided for the July 22nd hearing were lacking a lot of information about the wind turbines for the project, giving no information on the foundations required or the actual size of the turbines. The wind turbine height information shown on illustration 9 and 18 did not support the numbers shown on the staff report dated July 2nd. Information at the August 26th open house did not agree with the information given at the July 22nd meeting. How can informed decisions be made when the project information keeps changing? There have been no studies done to evaluate potential impacts on the use of the use of the adjacent land for grazing livestock. Visual impacts, noise, and ground vibrations associated with the wind turbines could render adjacent lands useless. Studies in Wyoming, very recent studies, have shown that antelope will avoid the area around the wind turbines even after construction is complete, and there's no activity other than the wind turbines themselves. Horses and cattle are sensitive to ground vibrations, to noise, both audible and low-level noise. Another concern is that this illustration 24 shows a drainage system line, but there's no discussion to go with it, so we can't tell if the natural drainage from the project area that would normally go onto his land will be disturbed or not. In conclusion, there's many other issues he's hopeful others will address. He would request that you deny this proposed project until adequate countywide zoning ordinance can be developed that are very specific to solar panels and wind turbines. And the issues that developed over the solar panel farm in New Underwood should point out there are still issues that apparently are not adequately covered by ordinances. And I will provide you with his.
Thank you.
I also have a map of where the railroad 164 Avenue is, but apparently that's been determined that was misused in other documents. Okay, and this is on behalf of myself. I also am requesting that you do not approve this conditional use permit at this time. One of my main points is that on the July 22nd meeting, the company representing Eurotech, when questioned, said they were seeking to build in South Dakota because of the lack of regulations and zoning in this state. That should be a big red flag that they're avoiding places where there is adequate zoning and regulation. Maybe we need to get ahead of this before it becomes a financial burden on all the citizens here. There was a discussion earlier about talking about load limits on roads and highways. And I'm curious to know if there will be a road repair bond required of this company as well. The decommissioning plan on page 18 says they have allowed $125,000 for road repairs off of the property, I'm assuming. In Kansas, they have documented $4.96 million in road damages caused by wind farm development by Apex Clean Energy, which was a much larger wind farm, but still a similar situation. The project was operational in 2021, and they posted a road damage bond of $500,000. Up to date, the county has $4.96 million in damages, and they can't repair the roads because they don't have the money to repair county roads. So I think South Dakota and Pennington County both need to know from the time these components enter the state, what roads are they going to be on? Are the roads and the bridges capable of handling those weight limits on a continuing basis? At the open house, it was stated that the entire project will have solar panels, including under the turbines. That wasn't presented here today. I don't know if that was something they threw out to see how it bounced and it's gone again or not. But if they're going to be wind panels under the turbines, that's another consideration that the county needs to know about. Concerns about fencing. Obviously, the property line fences need to be maintained in their current and proper condition to keep livestock out of it, because it does not appear that the project fencing will be along the property lines. And within the planning documents, it states on PV5 illustration that the total acreage is the 1,100 acres, the solar farm is 545 acres, and the fenced area is only 331 acres. If indeed there's going to be solar panels under the wind turbines, the entire acreage will have to have that fencing. Again, information on the wind turbines is very inadequate. We know nothing about what they're going to be doing for the foundations, what kind of materials there are in there. And someone pointed out to me today, if they only have to remove the concrete and rebar structures to 30 inches or even 60 inches, that is not adequate if they're going to restore the grassland grasses. Those roots on those can go 20 feet deep. So if they're going to restore it to what it is now, 60 inches is not adequate, and 30 inches certainly is not adequate. And I've seen no mention whatsoever of any kind of an archaeological study for this site. I know it's not state ground, it's not federal ground, but I can assure you the Native Americans in the area consider it their ground, and if there are artifacts there, they need to be addressed. Ground cover restoration. One of their plans said they were going to reference trees and shrubs appropriate to Winneconne County, which is apparently in Maryland, not in South Dakota. So I don't think we really care what trees and shrubs are appropriate in Maryland. Issues with noise limits. The 5.5 dBA at the closest property line, and who's going to measure this and when are they going to measure it? What repercussions will there be to the company if they are exceeding that at the adjacent property lines? There's a lot of issues being determined with noise levels that are, let me find the proper wording here, that they're not audible noises, they're low-level noises, and they are very debilitating to people who have a history of car sickness or seasickness, who have migraines, or have additional hearing damage. They can be very debilitating, and there are ways to measure those. I'd like to see that added to the requirements that they monitor those as well. The decommissioning plan seems to assume that both the turbines and the solar panels will be decommissioned at the same time, but in the decommissioning plan itself, it said the wind turbine's life is about 25 years, and the solar panels is much longer. Are we going to have them remove the turbines immediately when they reach the end of their life? Are we going to have them remove failed wind turbines immediately or at the end of the life of the project? There are issues, certainly, with disposal of the blades. In Minnesota, there was a town where someone stored used blades temporarily on their property. And they've been there since 2020 now. The company that was going to take them away and do something went bankrupt. And one of the people of that company started another company to take care of them, but said they would not be responsible for the previous wind turbines that were not disposed of properly. So I think they need to remove wind blades to a proper disposal area immediately if appropriate. I was wondering if this financial surety bonds, can they be used if there's microfiber cleanup needed on adjacent lands from the deterioration from the blades? And then I had some other comments about some of the staff report findings that I can give to you. One place, the architect said the site would not produce any harmful fossil fuels, but the wind turbines themselves use quite a bit of fossil fuel that is subject to leakage into the groundwater systems. had a comment on the parts of the reports that were prepared by licensed engineers, and I find myself embarrassed to think professional engineers doesn't know the difference between acres and acres, but apparently they don't. Again, they talked about vegetation from a county not in the state. Their environmental report talked about environmental regulations in Illinois, which is fairly irrelevant to South Dakota. There's a lot of slop in these things, and I don't really know if we know what they're asking you to give them a conditional use permit for. And I've just talk about the financial benefit to the area. I've seen it in print and several of things about tens to millions of dollars increase to the local tax base. And I've heard a couple discussions, I still don't see any basis for thinking we're gonna get tens of millions of dollars added to the tax base. Most of the things are, for the solar panel and the wind turbines are coming from out of state, taxes will be paid out of state. They'll have people working here who are more than likely from out of state, they're not gonna be paying income tax to South Dakota, obviously. If the property tax on that 1,000 acres goes up that much, I'd be really surprised. I don't think the county commission's gonna charge millions of dollars in extra property taxes for the wind turbine and solar farm. And they've said on a couple of occasions, the adjacent landowners will not be designated as anything but what they are now, so there should be no unusual increase in property taxes other than what there already will be. So what is our true benefit here?
We, at the last meeting, after the last meeting, got the information that currently that land is rated as agriculture, but once it's built, it will turn to regular tax rate, so it will be quite a significant increase.
Millions of dollars. Wow.
No, I'm not necessarily saying that.
Well, in their future documentation, I'd like to see more information. I don't know if any of you got a copy of the handout from the open house. Was it provided to you?
I did, because I was there. Kevin might have it too. You have it, Kevin?
I would like to give you a copy of it then, along with my comments and Seth Short's comments. And that's the end of my presentation.
Did you want to respond to some of those items?
So, look, I appreciate you coming so well prepared, and obviously you have assembled information that, you know, is important, but you said a couple of things, especially regarding noise and safety, that, you know, you're not the first person to raise these concerns. Obviously, solar and wind have been taking place for a long time in many different jurisdictions. The ecosystem survives very nicely. There's a difference, solar and wind, obviously, in terms of the perimeter. Animals can graze where there are turbines, less so where there are solar panels, but you can have pollinators. I mean, there are lots of things that we can do and intend to do to make these things gel well together. Personally, you specifically said that at the July 22nd meeting, in response to Commissioner Kuhn's question about you live in Florida, why are you coming all the way over here? Don't you have enough sun in the Sunshine State? I did not say that we're in South Dakota because there's no regulation or zoning here. But I want to debunk that because I don't want people to be left with that impression. There are excellent regulations and zoning ordinances in South Dakota, including right here in Pennington County, and we are doing our level best to follow every one of them to the letter. Florida is one of very few states left in the United States where the utilities have work together with the regulators so that smaller companies like Yarrowtech or even National Grid, if you're not an Xterra, if you're not one of these large regulated utilities, you are not allowed to build anything above a very small number in those states. There are very few of them. There are about 5 or 6 left. So South Dakota is in the majority of states in the United States that is considered to be a partially regulated or deregulated state. That does not mean that we don't have the regulations in this state that are designed to protect from all of the things that you mentioned. From the tax, I think the chair mentioned this, the tax is not going to come from property taxes, and Brittany, I think, clarified at the end of the last meeting that if you're a neighboring agricultural community or agricultural land, from what I understand, is taxed based on production. So if your neighbor is now producing power, and it's the revenue from the power that will be generated that is going to be taxed. So we are going to be producing, many, many, many millions of kilowatts that are going to be sold to whether it's the utility or some other off-taker, and those revenues are going to be taxed for a period of 25 or more years. A portion of that tax will be deployed right back here in the county. It is up to the county to decide what portion of that goes to the school board, what portion of that goes to other demands in the county. So those are the few things I wanted to highlight. I also, you talked about a future presentation, next iteration. I want to give you my personal email, my personal phone number. If you or Mr. Sherb, who's hopefully going to be our neighbor in the project, want to discuss any of these things, I want you to feel comfortable, and please share with him as well and anybody else who's interested that it is our objective to make sure that every single point in the many that you shared with us this morning is explained in a manner that you'll be satisfied with. And I don't mean to be theatrical, but this is, this is my, I should have a business card here. And if I don't, I'll get it from my briefcase. And I just want you to feel that, I have one in my briefcase. I'll get you one before the meeting is over. I really want you to feel that you have unfettered access to discuss all of those things because they're important. You put a lot of time into putting that together, and we want to dedicate at least as much time to giving you the answers you deserve.
So Lion, his name is Shorb.
Shorb, I'm sorry.
There you go, you're okay.
Since I believe this is the first wind turbine project in the county, I think we need to tread carefully here, make sure our financial liabilities are fully covered. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I ask that we waive rules? And I'd like to hear from the other adjacent property owner next, Mr. Mader.
Okay.
Even if he's not in your order. And the reason being, he also brought a number of other names to the surface that oppose in its existing condition, though the proposal before us. And I'm kind of less is more, so I'm trying to give a hint to the folks that they stay on the subject. And if something's going to be repeated, repeat it, but don't dwell on it, because we're just citizens like you, with the exception of the one person sitting over here who was elected to do this, and we take it into consideration, but I would like to hear from the other adjacent property owner next.
Okay. Jerry Mader.
Good morning, and thank you. I guess I'd like to start, well, as you brought up, we have about 300 signatures on this petition opposing this project, or the two projects.
Jerry, that's going to be necessary to turn it into her for the records, please.
Yes, you bet,
Thank
I
you.
sure will. Well, when we first heard about this project, I guess I thought with an open mind, we needed to listen to everything and do quite a bit of research. And so we did, and I guess I feel today that we still probably oppose it fairly strongly. I guess there's quite a few concerns. I guess, of course, the visual concern is one, but probably the main one is it seems like it's going to be a big project that's not really going to do the local community very much good as far as we can see. A little bit of tax revenue seems to be about the end of it. I guess there's some other factors too that we have researched and come up with, that there's some, it affects the weather, maybe creates a drier climate behind these wind towers and a warmer atmosphere with the solar panels, and then the wind charger towers turning and disturbing the air and mixing all that together seems to be a little bit of an issue. And it's the first hybrid plant, as far as we know, in South Dakota, so it's kind of a groundbreaking project, and we'd like to put a lot more time into it and be more prepared for so we don't make mistakes along the way and we have to pay for it down the road. And I guess probably this is a hard thing for me to talk about, but we have some concerns about the credibility with both parties. The two meetings that we've had in the past, it seemed like we get a lot of questions asked, but we really don't get any good solid answers to them. And I know as a neighbor to this ranch, we board it for several miles. They brought buffalo in a few, 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago maybe now. And the manager on the ranch is just an excellent person, has done a very good job of trying to keep the buffalo off of our property and other people's property. But they brought the buffalo in, and the South Dakota requirement is a 5-wire, 5 feet high fence. And they're just like a 100-year-old 3-wire fence, which works good for cattle, but it isn't efficient enough or good enough to stop buffalo. And they brought in, I think, close to 800 head of them, and several hundred of them have been on our property several different times. And again, the ranch manager did an excellent job of trying to keep them off of there, but the owner didn't seem to be too concerned at all about that. And I guess it always kind of bothered me that he just didn't really care. And I know he's got some other properties, rental properties, apartments and whatnot, that he doesn't exactly have the best reputation on. So I guess maybe to clarify, I guess I'm concerned about the follow-up down the road. If somebody's going to have something like this, I'd like to make sure that it's taken care of properly and have the right management, the right care. And I think there's the general consensus of all of our neighbors. And I guess there's quite a few other points that probably could be made. But I guess I was also somewhat conservatively offered maybe to put some wind towers on our property. And I guess I'm not interested in anything like that at this time. And I don't know what the purpose behind that was, but you can make your own judgment on it, I guess. I guess another concern too is it seems like most of the electrons that are produced on this site will probably or most likely be shipped out of the area. And I don't know that necessarily New Underwood area will be, or Rapid City area will be a priority. I think as the electrons are produced, they have to be basically sold down the line ahead of time. And even if we have an emergency outage, I'm not sure that we can necessarily have access to that. I'm not convinced of that. And then, of course, the decommissioning, it seems like a lot of the information in that book has the recycled value of it fairly high, and the bonding seems fairly low. So I'm very concerned that if we have a tornado or a bad hailstorm, and if there's not enough money generated from it, it may just be abandoned and not necessarily cleaned up and returned back to its natural state as what we think is a wonderful grasslands. And so I guess at this time I would request that the commission deny the conditional use permit. And I think that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Mader?
Jerry, I'd like to ask on, this project doesn't involve the buffalo anymore. What do you think? Your other neighbor commented their concerns about the fencing around the entire area. You guys as owners just kind of decide what you're going to fence and what you don't fence.
You mean around the project area?
Yeah, please.
Well,
versus the entire property.
Okay. would assume it would be very similar to the one near New Wonder where they have a chain link fence and a buffer zone, and so I would assume that that would probably be sufficient. I think in the
Near the
plans,
fixtures that they're operating, in other words, not necessarily every square inch of the property.
of the project property, I mean.
You're saying near the project property, but not necessarily every square inch of the platted property.
Right,
involved.
yeah, I think there's a requirement in that engineering book that specifies the kind of fencing, which I think is chain link. So I think that would be sufficient. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, what about out of the, let's just say 400 acres, there's 700 other acres.
Okay,
And your other neighbor indicated they thought the fencing should move out to the edge of the property.
oh, well, I guess I don't know the answer to that. I would assume they'd probably leave the current fence in place, which is sufficient for our cattle, and I guess the solar panels won't be trying to crawl out, so it should be good.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Okay, very
Here.
good, thank you.
Yes.
So Jerry, when you went to see the other solar farm, what are some of the questions and what do you feel like it's different from the presentations? Because I keep hearing about the presentation that we've seen so far.
Well, I really appreciated the gentleman that we talked to at that, what they call Wild Springs Solar Farm. He's very forthcoming, very genuine, very descriptive in his answers. He didn't seem to be evasive in any way. He, I guess when we asked him any question, he either knew a good answer with a good explanation, or he didn't know the answer, and he would just say he didn't know. He didn't, try to lead us on in any direction whatsoever.
So do you feel from the meetings you have that you have a good understanding of what, basically on the taxes, the erosion, the roads and the safety of the panels, the turbines at this project? Is it different than that because of the explanation or how it was presented, and why?
Well, I would say how it's presented and being on that site, I was very impressed. It was very clean and seemed to be well-kept and well-managed. And I guess there's just, on the new project here, is just so many questions that don't seem to be getting answered completely. It was probably a little bit better today than it has been in the past, but it almost seemed like the answers have been somewhat evasive, or maybe not everybody's as informed as they should be at this stage.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then you've been sending me, and a bunch of people have been sending me different information on new generation and green energy. What do you think of new generation or green energy at this point? You've went to a solar plant, your ag, and that's the main concern I keep hearing is the ag and the area changing the landscape more into a commercial environment instead of an ag area. Is that one of the issues, or is just this project? I mean, I'm getting mixed emotions on different people from this, and I had good conversations with you about it, so maybe just some concerns that you have about some of the new generation of the green energy coming into the ag industries.
You know, I think it's probably a great idea. I don't know, I don't really believe that the technology is at a place where we can, put billions of dollars into it yet. I mean, some of the solar farms are supposedly only about 15% efficient, and it just seemed like we should be farther down the road before we throw so much money into it. And I think, like I say, it's a great idea, I believe, and it's probably coming in the future. I just am not convinced that we're at that stage yet where they can be actually productive without so much production cost going into it.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry, for answering the questions.
Sure. Anybody else?
Just one question.
Yeah.
What's the distance between your property and the solar farm here, the nearest one?
Yeah, well, there's two of us that are the same. We're on the north side of it, and then Seth Short was on the west side of it. And we border this first 1,100 acres, we border it for 1.5 miles, but then the next proposed 800 acres, we will border it for about 4 miles altogether. I think we border that ranch maybe about 8 miles or something total, but that would be the,
So the nearest point, though, is a mile on some, you said?
yeah, I guess it would be the setback. How am I trying to describe it? We have the same fence, we share the same fence line between us and that ranch where that proposed site will be. So does that explain or answer your question?
Kind of.
Yeah. Oh, maybe I misunderstood. Yeah, the setback will be 1,000 feet.
From your property.
Yeah, okay, I misunderstood, sorry.
Okay.
But yeah, the fence line, we share the same fence line, but the setback, I believe, is 1,000 feet, so, yeah.
Okay.
Any further questions? Okay. Justin Uhrig?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name's Justin Uhrig, local rancher with my family. We live what would be pretty much east, in the northeast corner of the Cheyenne River Ranch. My concerns on this current facility relate a lot to the fact that it's not been demonstrated a lot in South Dakota, the fact that we don't have a lot of experience with doing a property like this. I do have a few questions for these gentlemen at this point, if they don't mind answering before I kind of get into a little bit of my statement, I guess.
Good to be with you again.
Yeah, well, thank you. I guess, so you guys demonstrated.
Point of order for the people listening to it, they have to reintroduce themselves to the.
My name is Lion Roth, I'm the chairman of Yarotech.
And Mark Tippett, Chief Development Officer.
Thanks, you guys.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lenny. So the transmission line has been demonstrated on your graph today that it's going to go straight west out of the property. Now, how are you going to connect to WAPA, and have you contacted WAPA about that yet?
Yes, yes. So we probably contracted WAPA about 1.5 years ago. Actually, the office that manages that line is out of Billings, Montana. And essentially, the connection line would come from the project along the section line. And then underneath, there's a roughly 100-foot transmission easement under the line. There would be essentially electronic equipment that would terminate the line that connects it, and then it would be an arc up to the transmission line itself.
Okay. That was kind of my wanting to get an understanding of where this, I mean, basically it's a small substation that's going to have to sit under the WAPA line to be able to tie up to the lines overhead.
Yes, most of the electrical equipment to essentially the wind and the solar, they produce electricity at certain voltages. That voltage has to be stepped up. It's stepped up, and which is then matching the voltage of the transmission line. Most of that occurs actually at the project level, on the project site, and then that higher voltage connection line comes to WAPA and, essentially terminates in some much abbreviated equipment and then connects up to the line itself.
Okay. So since it'll be in the WAPA easement, you really don't need any additional landowners is what it amounts to? Okay, that was understanding. Can you talk, and I know not everyone back here can see this picture, but can you talk to it, and I can hold it up to the commissioners a little bit, but this shows a little bit, Mr. Mader commented about an additional 800 acres, and I think this picture basically includes that additional 800 acres. It's in your packet. Can you speak to what this map is referencing, why an additional 800 acres are included? And I don't know that it's 800 exact, but it says roughly 1,933 acres total, so roughly there's about 800 included in this photo.
So essentially, the larger area was just it was acquired with the landowner to make sure that there was an adequate amount of land to do what we are ending up doing. We ended up actually reducing by half, almost half, the actual land that we're using. So And again, one of the other reasons to do both wind and solar, which by the way, you know, they could, the wind could be sitting in one portion and the solar could be sitting in another. We know that land usage, whether it's owned by someone or not owned by someone, you know, the footprint on the land is always an important issue. So we wanted just to combine the area where the wind turbines are going to be and use solar panels in the area that would not have been useful for anything else, so that we could go from 1,900 down to 1,000 in terms of the total site area.
Why would you pick that portion, I guess, of the 800 acres that you're now excluding when that was some of the absolute roughest on that ranch?
Drainage? Wasn't that?
I'm sorry, what's
The ranch is varied in topography pretty extensively.
Yes.
And we've been out there near it, and I've seen how some of this lays, and some of the map, how it shows up on there. You guys are gonna have to do a lot of leveling. Some of that right next to these dams that are on this property. And relative to some of that ground at New Underwood, you're gonna have to do a little more leveling than even what they did. That 800 acres is even rougher yet, and I just don't understand why that was even considered to begin with, to be honest.
It was just purely so that we would throw the net over something that's a lot bigger than we needed. You'll see that we're not building anything on that rough acreage.
Initially, just to clarify, because you're right, initially it was considered.
You would consider building wind on those portions?
We're not building anything on those portions.
I know, but that's, you said it was considered for the wind portion.
Initially, the whole project, we first looked at this as a wind project. And then we realized that based on the topography and the other factors, and I mentioned this earlier, we're calling it a hybrid.
Lion, speak in the mic, thank you.
So just to clarify, that portion that you are bringing here, and I want to know what your point is, because we're not using that portion. The overall size of the Cheyenne River Ranch is 20,000 acres. So I think that it's pretty clear that we're just using about 5% of that, and even within that 5%, we're using about 30% of the 5. So about 2% of the overall Cheyenne River Ranch right now, and I think one of the commissioners asked earlier, as a point of clarification, we could use a little more, but that portion is not even part of the portion that we're asking for a conditional use permit.
And I think I understand that, but I just wanted to clarify, I guess, why it was still included in the book.
Yeah, well.
It's just part of the land lease.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I think that's probably my questions at this point. I presume you guys have both been out there on the site?
Yes.
Have you utilized the ranch manager of that property and asked him anything about that ranch? I mean, he's been on that place for 20 years, kind of his thoughts?
He will absolutely be very involved going forward, yes.
But to this point, he's not been the one that gave you tours or anything like that?
For what we've needed to do up to this point, there hasn't really been a need yet.
Okay.
And so when you look at water features and things like that, I mean, the ordinance is very clear about how far you have to be set back from water. There was a question earlier about, historical and tribal lands. A Phase 1 environmental study has been done for this project, and that's included in that document that you have. So there beyond the Phase 1 is a Phase 2, and then there's a Phase 3. But but everything, including water features, wildlife, historical, locations, all of those things have been looked at, and no red flags, and that is included.
But I want to make one thing clear, because I brought it up earlier, and I want you to walk away from the podium feeling that your questions have been addressed. So, yes, we did a preliminary analysis. When the commissioner asked me some questions about the folder, and you have a copy with you, there's a lot of thought and work that went into that. But we're in the second or third inning. This is not, in other words, there were no red flags, but that doesn't mean that we know dispositively that every environmental concern, every archaeological concern, every other engineering, topographical concern has been resolved completely. That's why this is a 3-year process. That's why that's why that portion was rejected, because of the same thing that you observed, and it sounds to me like you also, if you don't know the ranch manager well, I'm assuming you guys probably have communicated, he will be an integral part of the process, as will other stakeholders, when we get into the 4th, 5th, 6th innings and go forward. So we're past the initial stages, and that's how that book was assembled. The red flags were looked for, but helped us define where on a 20,000 portion parcel we wanted to focus, and some of that had to do with proximity to transmission, proximity to other things, topography that you pointed out. But I don't want you to leave here thinking that we have all the answers to every single question and we're ready to hit the ground running tomorrow. We're not. But we're highly confident that we did a lot of work leading up to the last meeting and the town hall and today. And I sense that there's pushback and 300 signatures and you taking the time out of your morning, maybe some of the afternoon, to be here. But I think that at least you should walk away with the impression that we picked things because we think they would be best for what we're hoping to focus on, but also remember that if we pick one thing, that means we rejected the rest of it for all the reasons that we've talked about.
So a little bit about the design then. It seems to me a lot of wind turbines that you usually see the projects on, they're never in a perfect L pattern. It seems like they're always scattered along a ridge top, which there is a longer ridge running there, as opposed to making a turbine fit a perfect pattern. And I assume that has a lot to do with efficiency and impact to each other, is why they're kind of staggered so sporadically on a lot of other projects. So on this one, it seems like the wind turbines are being placed just mostly for space savings. And I'm worried that that's more of a priority than maybe the impact that they have to each other or the impact that they will just create overall. Is that a fair assessment? I mean, I guess that's my statement, and I'll allow you to respond.
So, I mean, as a South Dakotan, you should be proud that South Dakota is actually a leader in wind. So we talked about this as novel, it hasn't been done before. So the juxtaposition of wind and solar haven't been done. In this county, I believe that the only major renewable project is the solar project that we've been talking about a little bit this morning. If you travel to other parts of the state, South Dakota is actually a leader in wind power generation nationwide. And I've seen all sorts of configurations. So the perfect L that you saw up there, I didn't come up with the design, but we're working with a firm that's done dozens of wind projects. And it's their belief, based, like I said, second or third innings, that this is an optimal way to generate the most power. I heard, Jerry made some comments about the impact that it has on the climate. This portion's too hot, this portion's too cold. Don't want to, make light of those comments because they're important. But this has been vetted pretty extensively, certainly on the wind part in South Dakota, on the solar part in Pennington County. So if you want to sort of take a negative view towards what we're doing, as you seem to be, you can pour through the book and try to catch us on a nit here or there. But there's a lot of thought that went into this, and we're pretty proud of what we're presenting.
Just one comment also on the configuration. If this were wind only, then there definitely would be wind turbines in that other space, because when we decided to make a wind project, but also solar, then we had a lot more space than was needed for wind. The prevailing wind is kind of in this direction, and so what the biggest engineering factor for where you put wind turbines, not so much how much space is between them. Usually there's about 3 rotors with spacing between them, so that the vorticity off of the wind blades, don't affect. But the biggest thing is what's behind them. you want to put almost 6 times the amount of height distance-wise, so that, you know, the wind turbulence from one in front doesn't affect the one in back. Because of the direction of the predominant wind, this arrangement kind of doesn't have any turbines behind any other turbines, and that's why we were able to.
But if it's going, prevailing wind is out of the northwest, and you've got your wind turbines running east and west, and then north and south on the east side, isn't there going to be some overlap there, possibly at the very least in that corner where there's some turbulence?
The distance between them, so you know, these ones, the wind hits here, 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 and there's no row behind that.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
If you guys would oblige me a little bit of a few more minutes, I'd appreciate it. As I mentioned, I am a local rancher. I'm a father, I am a husband, and I do spend a lot of time on this ground. I have not given light consideration to this. In fact, I've tried to approach it with a very open mind. One, we are a business. We do have to consider business aspects like this. Would it be profitable for us to consider an adventure like this? So I've tried to, one, approach it from a business mindset, but also approach it from the mindset of the planning and commissioners as well, knowing that they have a big decision on their plate, and they need to consider what's good for the general public of Pennington County, and they also need to consider what's good for a business that's coming in. So I'm not trying to approach this as narrow-minded. I think you will figure out where my stance is if you don't already know. I've tried to spend as much time as I could since the initial meeting on July 22nd. Some of what I've done is I initially met with Mr. Mader and some of the other residents prior to the 22nd meeting, and we had a sit down and we discussed some of the projects so we better understood it to begin with. We attended the meeting on the 22nd at the Planning and Zoning Commissioners. We researched the landowner, the wind projects, and other solar and wind projects. We talked to ranchers in Meade County that live in the shadow of turbines that were placed in Butte County. We talked with members of West River Electric Co-op to get a better understanding of the taxes that come from the local effort of wind and solar. We also communicated with Pennington County Equalization to clarify that and to get a better understanding so we understood where these tax dollars were going. I attended the meeting at New Underwood with Yarrowtech on the 26th and tried to become more informed on what this project entailed. And I also took a tour at Wild Springs with some of the other members to get a better understanding and an open mind of what goes on with the solar aspect of this project. In addition, I also spoke with a meteorologist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, if you will, here in Rapid City. Some of what I've found, the base property for this location. I'd like to back up a little bit, and at the first meeting it was mentioned this was referred to as the Lemley Ranch. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you are not. That is a reference to Pete Lemley. Pete Lemley is in South Dakota historic books. I'm not saying the ranch is, but Pete is. He lived from 1869 to 1961, and in 1986 he was inducted into the South Dakota Hall of Fame. There is a book on Pete Lemley called The Badlands Facts that gives some history on some of the events that went on that ranch. When Pete operated, it was approximately 30,000 acres. To this day, it has been cut back. It was sold multiple times, added on to, contracted. At one point was referred to as the SMS Ranch or the Rapid Creek Ranch, and now Cheyenne River Ranch. That's not all the landowners, but it gives a rundown of some of the biggest ones. The current landowner, I believe, purchased the ranch, and it was either 20 or 21, I don't know the exact date on that, is an out-of-state investor. He's not local. He has affiliation with other businesses that are currently located in the state of South Dakota. Some of those businesses are located in the Black Hills, in Rapid City, and as well in Sioux Falls. And I present some of this because, as Mr. Johnson, you mentioned earlier when you were considering one of the other projects, you look at the grand scope of everything. You mentioned how well-kept a property was and thought that was an addition to that property and how it was managed before. So I think in looking at this project, we have to look at the full scope of how everything is managed in this situation as well. Local renters and Sioux Falls articles have revealed that the management of these other properties by the current landowner of the Cheyenne River Ranch has been lackluster at best. There is number of articles out of Florida, out of Sioux Falls, mentioning how facilities have not been maintained. And as you heard Mr. Mader mention, the ranch has not been maintained the same way. There was buffalo placed on that ranch, and they were not fenced in properly. The ranch was leased out, so those were not the landowners. Most of those buffalo were not the current owner's buffalo, but either way, they are still slightly responsible because they do have a responsibility to maintain fences, and as well, South Dakota required them to have a 5-wire, 5-foot-high fence. Their lack of concern for the neighbors is what concerned us up front. Within 7 days at one point, there was almost 200 buffalo that were out 8 times and were replaced back into corrals, some of those times with the help of many neighbors. Sometimes that was done with the manager that is on the property. Either way, it caused damage to the neighboring properties. When you look at how the property is managed to begin with up front, I have grave concerns. How's this ranch going to be managed long-term with a $2 million asset on top of it? Is it going to be managed in the same way that other assets are managed by them? Turning to look at Yarrowtech. Yarrowtech has not been extremely experienced in the wind energy in South Dakota, let alone the United States. They have told you they've primarily focused in Puerto Rico and are trying to get a better foothold in the United States. Most of their projects, they have mentioned they have had no experience with a hybrid, and I think that needs to be considered extremely hard by you guys. We have not had a hybrid system in our state, and there is not many hybrid systems. The current Wild Springs project, they mentioned that they do not have either. They do have wind, they do have solar, but they did not combine them, as was mentioned earlier. Looking at wind energy. Wind energy production is becoming increasingly restricted in many other states. Many of those states have altogether, in some counties, banned it. Iowa is is one of those states that has reduced a lot of the abilities of wind and solar to go into their counties. Some Iowa counties have reduced their setbacks from 1,200 feet to 2,500 feet, and they've also reduced their setbacks from houses up to 2 miles. Counties have found that turbines are greatly impacting the radar detection abilities as well in those areas. You can see radar inflections in counties in, Kansas and Iowa. And why is that important to us? Well, we do have a radar ball that is located at New Underwood that will have implications from this project. I placed a call to NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in Rapid City, to have a better understanding to make sure that this truly was a concern. He stated that yes, turbines impact radar. The current deflection of the turbines that are located in Butte County does happen. That project is 50 miles from our current Doppler radar ball that's just north of New Underwood. The concerns related to NOAA deal with their ability to accurately detect rain events and tornadoes around turbines. The New Underwood radar ball will be approximately 11 miles from this site. They said they would like to be informed of this so that they know that this project is going on, so that they can better understand how it's going to impact radar going down the line. Turbines also have many concerns as related to local weather impacts. Turbines cause variations in temperature at ground level and above them. Ranchers in Meade County have witnessed what they are calling a rain shadow effect since the turbines were placed in Butte County. I asked the NOAA meteorologist if there is any basis to these articles and these claims, and his response was something to the point that turbines do cause turbulence in the atmosphere, so to assume some disruption to local wind and moisture patterns is not out of reason, but it is not a widely researched topic by him, so he would not speak any further to that and mention it to that degree, and that was it. I read some articles that, going to solar now, I read some articles that talked about anecdotal evidence of, nope, this is still on wind. I read some articles that talked about anecdotal evidence of decreased conception rates, poor performance, lameness, and death in goats, sheep, cattle, and horses, with many pictures showing some of this. I garnered that a lot of this is anecdotal, but a lot of anecdotal evidence usually leads to scientific support and backup. To the degree that they have started coining the term wind turbine syndrome, it seems that the evidence of these impacts is still 100%, is not 100% conclusive at this point, but it cannot be passed off as not a concern when we are going to be running livestock in the general facility. Some of these ranchers are going to be bordering these facilities within less than 100 feet, or excuse me, less than 1,000 feet of these turbines. These experiences have not been found just in the U.S., but also in Canada and Europe. Solar also received many added restrictions in the states that I mentioned earlier. Iowa has some of them, and there's national maps showing the restrictions that have continued to increase for many counties and other areas. After touring the Wild Springs facility, excuse me, let me back up a second here. Some concerns that I have related to solar is the reported heat generation and heat reflection of these facilities. After touring the Wild Springs facility, the heat generation and reflection was confirmed by the local operator that yes, there is some heat generation that comes off, whether it's produced there or reflected off of the panels. You could feel it as you walked those lines. You could also feel it as you stood next to the inverter. So logically, it was not out of reason to think that there is heat either reflected or produced from those solar panels. My concern has to be with the fact that this is a hybrid system and the fact that they're going to be combining a turbulence, be combining the wind towers and creating turbulence as well as heat generation from both the wind turbines and the solar panels in the same space. And my concern has to do with the local weather impact. When you've got ranchers that are claiming that they have had a rain shadow since they've been occupied by those turbines in Butte counties, I am concerned about that because we live downwind from that, and there's many other ranches that live downwind from that. I also have concern over how our state is currently set up for local effort from wind and solar taxation. As it currently sits, and in a conversation with Shannon Champion, she stated that 50% of the local effort, whether it's from this project or the one that currently exists at Wild Springs, would go to the local school systems. However, it differs for wind and solar, and they attempted to change this before Wild Springs went in, but they did not succeed at the state level. Currently, if, let's just say, for example, there's $100,000 that is generated from local effort from the sales of taxable income off of Wild Springs, 50,000 of that would go to the New Underwood school system because 50% goes directly to the school. At the state level, they do not have to necessarily, they can reduce what comes from the state aid back 50,000. Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
So that's with solar. With wind, it is not the same. So with wind, there's 5 years that they will be allowed to have 100% of that local effort, and then it reduces down until year 10. So I guess my concern is that this is proposed as the benefit to the local community and to our local schools, but our New Underwood school system is poor. We need something else, but there's no guarantee that they're going to get an additional dime off of the current Wild Springs based on how our state laws are set at this point. If we're going to proceed ahead with doing things like this, then this county needs to figure out how that gets changed on a solar level so that we do guarantee more money from Wild Springs at the New Underwood school system. Until that point, I would sure like to see us take a step back and not proceed ahead. In summary, the current landowner has demonstrated a pattern of less than ideal management of their properties. The project management has acted in a very untrustworthy fashion, whether it's not directly answering questions. They have stated, and they even have started to do what I have perceived as a bribe. As Mr. Mader mentioned, they contacted him at this point to see if he would be interested in doing wind turbines, and I don't know how else to read that other than a last-ditch effort to get a bribe to get something through. I don't know what their intent was at that point, and maybe they want to speak to it, but I don't find it very trustworthy in my book at this point. The current design of wind and solar on the property seems more centered around what will provide a maximum tax credit and not what will be the best lay of the land currently. While electricity generation is needed, the parties and design of this project are not good for Pennington County, especially considering that wind and solar only have a 30 to 35% capacity factor. As a landowner, I would have no interest in working with these parties. And as a commissioner, I have no interest in approving this experimental project for our county at this point. I am encouraging you at this time not to approve this conditional use permit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Justin, and you referred to me when I was talking about being a good neighbor, a project being a good neighbor. And that's why I wanted to hear from the two adjacent property owners first. But I have to tell you, we're reviewing a conditional use permit here. I don't mean to rain on your parade. But you have the right to ask for a conditional use permit too on an item. We review items. One I can think of would be a perfect example. We've had a number of requests now to make grain silos into vacation home rentals for agritourism. I can't think of anything that, in my mind, I can't support that. I think somebody's finally going to get electrocuted or the lightning's going to hit one thing. We're going to sizzle everybody in it. And so I'm saying they're coming forward with this request. It's rightfully on the right table. So that's what we're looking at right now. Some of the items you referred to are certainly on a federal and a state level, way beyond my pay grade. That's all.
Understandably, but I think they warranted mentioning, one, because not everybody's aware of them. But yes, they do need mentioned at this point, so we understand how taxes are working, so that we don't assume, yes, our school system is gonna get more money. I don't want that assumption being made at this point.
But under less is more, those are things we can't pull the trigger on.
No, you can't. And I understand that
But
fully.
we do have the responsibility to review their requests the same way we did those people with the silos.
Yes, you do.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thanks. Betty Kaneski? Kaneski?
Hello, my name is Betty Kaneski, and Seth Sharp is my grandson. He couldn't be here today.
Can you pull the microphone closer to you?
Okay, I have a soft voice. Justin and Eileen have covered a lot of the points I was going to make, but I'm still irritated with them using my grandson's physical address in their legal notices in the paper. It was quite shocking to see our places plastered all over KOTA. It wasn't their fault, it's the address they had. And another thing that hasn't been addressed is the danger of fires from them. I have an article if you would like it. In Iowa, 2 of the wind turbines were struck by lightning, and that was on May 13th, and on the 22nd of June, they still had debris, and there's pictures of it in their cornfield. Well, if that had happened here, we don't have green cornfields. We have very dry conditions out there right now. And we run cattle and horses and mares. We've got colts in this pasture where this is going to be. I'm sure that's going to have effect on our cattle and our horses. And the wind turbines, as far as I can tell, are toxic. The amount of material that goes into them for the return, it's not looking green to me. And like they said, he's not a resident of South Dakota, he's from Florida. And I had company from Florida last year, and they were impressed with the beauty of this. We were in the draw before, down where this is going to be, and the quietness. And they want to come in here and change it. It's going to wreck our lifestyle, I'm pretty sure. The elevation between my house and where this project is going to be is over 200 feet higher. And by the time they get them on, I will be able to see them from my house the rest of my life, the noise. My daughter wanted to come up and testify. They have them in Missouri. They've got them stopped in the township they live in, but they're in the township next to them where they run cattle. And they found 2 dead cows in there. They should have had them posted to find out what they died from. She just lost her husband to cancer, so she can't come up right away, but she wanted to come testify the problems they have with wind turbines in Missouri. So like I said, Justin and Eileen have covered a lot of the things, but I can tell you we're totally against it. It's agricultural land, and Mr. Henry knew that when he bought the land. I'm sure it's going to have a bad impact on our ranching. And at the first meeting, they didn't even know there was houses any closer than the ranch house. And Buzzy Johnson is less than a half mile from this project. And we're concerned about the transmission line that's going to go, what's going to happen with that? We need to know that. And that's all I have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Durr?
I'm Jerry Durr. I live kind of out in the area out there off of 160th Avenue. And what Brittany is going to pull up is the comprehensive plan for Pennington County. And referencing what's in the comprehensive plan that speaks to solar and energy, which is not a lot. Yeah, 7, right there. So part of the permitting process of Yarrowtech speaks to, and it's highlighted by the planning office going through it, but it says that it's basically in compliance. Does it meet the criteria and compliance of our comprehensive plan? So if you look at the comprehensive plan, it doesn't speak to a lot about solar and energy, but you can read it here. The county should encourage the use of solar and energy, solar hot water panels, and other energy conservation and efficiency features in new construction, renovation, existing structures in accordance with state law. The county should coordinate with local utility providers to provide public education on energy, et cetera. And this is the one that kind of sticks out, 8.3. The county should support efforts when appropriately cited for the development use of alternative energy resources, including wind, solar, geothermal, biofuels, and cogeneration. And so what you've heard this morning, even though the box has been checked on the application for this project, looking at 8.3, I would say that you're hearing from the community that lives out there and over 300 people that this is not site appropriate. So it's in non-compliance with the comprehensive plan that's been adopted by Pennington County. And so when you say things, and I get it, when you say that as a local governmental entity, well, that's not a county thing, that's a state thing. Well, that's not a planning commission thing, that's a county commission thing. It's a state and federal thing. You're seeing a room full of people that have been talking about this ever since the Norwood project went in with, that solar plant up there. And even in our comprehensive plan for Pennington County, and in the ordinance, it references these as farms, and I spoke to this at farm. This is not producing anything that we think is beneficial for us. Yes, it is beneficial providing power, but we're talking about site appropriate, and we don't believe that this is site appropriate. And going back to that is changing really in the comprehensive plan. If you go back and read, there's a section in the comprehensive plan that speaks to breaking up the county based on the Black Hills and getting into geographic areas, talking about the Eastern Plains. And so this is the Eastern Plains, and talks about the plains being, agricultural, rolling hills and prairies, and you're talking to the people that live out there, and we're telling you that this impacts us. And it's not a personal thing against the company, but you do have an out-of-state company coming in from Florida that has primarily, as discussed, operated in the Caribbean, in Puerto Rico. And the New Underwood meeting talked about, well, how many projects do you have initiated in the United States? Well, we have a lot of projects in the works, but it would indicate that there's been nothing functional in the United States. Getting back to site location, et cetera, that is a concern in our zoning ordinance that allows this conditional use permit under ag property and allowing this type of thing to come in. And my question to you would be, and Brittany could probably answer it, but what is the limitation on the number of solar plants and wind plants that could go in under this conditional use permit? Is there a number of permits that can be issued? Is there a limit? Is it unlimited?
It would be based on whatever conditions. So right now, they would want 200 megawatts. If they wanted an additional, then they would have to come back and do an amendment.
No, I'm talking about another conditional use permit, not from them. We have the one up in New Underwood. They're applying for this conditional use permit to put in wind and solar. Is there a limit to the number of permits that would be issued by the county? So if there were 100 people that wanted to come in from out of state, 100 businesses, and say, in eastern Pennington County, we want to do a conditional use permit for wind and solar, we don't have a limit.
We do not have a limit, no.
Okay.
Jerry,
So-
can I ask a question? So you're asking density of these by whatever company? The density of them?
How many can you bring in?
Yeah.
Correct.
How many can you
Okay,
So-
that's, I just want to make sure that I understand. In other words, it could be another company, but what's the density in our county would be allowed?
Correct.
Thank you.
And what I'm seeing right now, just based on, what I've read in our ordinance and our comprehensive plan, there is no limit to it.
No limit.
So we do limit alcohol permits and alcohol licensing. We do limit, for example, when medical marijuana came in, and the counties were mandated by the state to initiate ordinances to comply with the new law with medical marijuana. And so a lot of the counties took a different approach to it. Some of them set a limit to the number of those permits and types of permits because you were given that authority. And, I was up in Meade County at the time when we adopted that ordinance, and we limited it to one licensing facility, one permit. The law didn't say how many you could issue, and we weren't in favor of it, so we did one. And so a lot of jurisdictions, when this stuff comes in, you can limit the number and amount that you're going to do, and that is what's scary, and that's really what you're hearing from everybody that lives out there, is this is kind of it's worse than the Wild West again. We're just we're gonna be changing the use of it, and it was mentioned, about why a company from Florida would come up here, and it was mentioned about the regulation, not that we don't have regulation, it was the fact that it was easier to do business here and to come into this area because of that. And so I understand the position that you're in, but what I'm talking about and what you're hearing is we have one facility up at New Underwood. We don't know what the ramifications and what is going to come of that. Justin is correct in his assessment of the taxation issue and looking at what the benefit is going to be to the local community. And right now, there is a concern with the people that live out there in our community that, one, the landowner is really not vested here. He lives out of state. Another company is coming in from out of state. And we are not set up to handle this right now. It's a clear indication, the fact that you could be dealing with this. I believe that this is just going to open up the floodgate in the entire landscape of the community that we live in eastern Pennington County, the rolling plains, the ag, the livestock, our families, our communities are going to be impacted and change. And then when you go to regulate this stuff, as long as you already have a permit in place, you have to look at that permit, not what regulation is going to be in a year, not 2 years down the road. What do we have to look at right now? And so this is a great concern about the fact that this is just going to be opening up Pandora's box and going back to what has been talked about the land use. And so Justin asked great questions about, why 1,000 acres, why 1,100 acres, and you're only utilizing 300. It's because, in my belief, once you get your foot in your door and you can get something through, then approved on 300 acres, the scope of this project doesn't seem that great. Then it turns into 1,000 acres, 1,100 acres. And when it comes down to, getting permission and, what is going to happen on where the lines are going to go and, getting into the county right-of-way. And and it's, and again, it's not their fault that they don't understand our local community. They don't understand, the structure of our government, that type of thing. They're looking at the ordinance. And there are things that, that we need to look at. And I guess, another project that is more in the open is bringing out some of the things that we need to look at. And that goes back to our zoning ordinance and the number of permits and how we would allow this and where is a best fit. So anyway, I just don't believe it fits our comprehensive plan because you're hearing from our community that is going to be impacted by this, that it is not site appropriate. And you get back to the top of this. And it talks about land use and housing element. And, so you're talking about coordinating with the people that live out there and that type of stuff through the comprehensive plan. You're hearing from us that we do not believe, again, that this really supports the philosophy of the comprehensive plan tied to the permitting process to allow another type of these facilities to go in our community. And you think about the conversations the last many months and the last couple of years over vacation home rentals. and about in a community that's already residential, and about somebody else having the ability to use their house in kind of a rental or short-term rental agreement, and what consternation and really legislation process that had to go through, and all the people talking about it. And now you're talking about something that can't even compare to a vacation home rental, that should be creating a lot more uproar, is the fact that this is not just changing an existing use, this is changing all the use of the property, from ag to non-ag, and going, it's not just a commercial business, you know, it's a power plant going in our community, and we don't want it. And so getting back to state government and federal government, that's exactly why we have a planning commission. That's why we have a county commission that's elected, is because we can come in and talk to you. It's going to be difficult to go in and talk to the PUC and do some of those things. You know what it's like going to Pier when you want to talk to your legislator. And so citizens sitting on the board, much appreciation that we can come in and talk to you and that you will listen to us. And this is the best service of government, is at the local level. And we're just asking you to listen, be open-minded, and deny this permit, and try to use this to do it. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Florence Thompson?
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Florence Thompson. I live near Caputa. I've got a little small ranch. And I'm also a board member of South Dakota Citizens for Liberty, and I'm speaking for South Dakota Citizens for Liberty as well as myself. It's hard to speak right before lunch. You guys have been sitting a long time, but at least you have soft chairs. So, why is an organization like South Dakota Citizens for Liberty, which is a constitutional, promoting constitutional liberties organization, why are we interested in these projects, and why are we opposing them? To do this, we really have to look at the big picture, and I know you guys, you have to look at the microscopic level. You know, you're down where the rubber hits the road and where it actually affects the people directly. But we've got to know where this is coming from. We have to look at the big picture. We have to draw out and take a 100-mile view of the earth and look at what's happening. Our founders of our American constitutional republic established that government to protect life, liberty, and property. They debated on whether to call it property. They called it pursuit of happiness. But what it is was property. Because in England, the king owned the property. And it was so important for them to own their own and control their own property. So that's why that is a basic foundation of our country and our Constitution. Agriculture is under attack around the world because of globalism and the Marxist and I would say fascist interests that are controlling these programs. And it's all done in the name of climate. It used to be global warming, then it was global cooling, then it was global warming again, then it was climate change, now it's just climate. But this is a theory that's used to justify all of these government programs. These are government subsidized programs. None of us would be here discussing this. These people wouldn't have come from Florida to do this if it wasn't government subsidies, federal government subsidies. Farmers and ranchers all over the world are losing their rights. This is not a local thing that's just happening here. It's pushed globally, and we are losing farmers and ranchers around the world, food producers, and it's going to engulf other producers as well, manufacturing, et cetera. They're going to control all the means of production. So the Green New Deal is a part of this, and that is what we are dealing with here because that's where these subsidies are coming from. Currently, we are very close to a national election, which could overturn the whole new Green Deal agenda. We
Madam
don't.
Chairman, point of order. This has gone way beyond our local politics. I'm sorry.
Think we
This
need
is
to.
not addressing the issue on the table, and we're all dealing with that. Do you have,
Thank you.
regarding this particular conditional
That
use?
is my point, that it does affect the local level.
Citizens of Liberty weren't happy with me 10 years ago, so they're going to be unhappy again. This is not the presentation I expect to hear. These other citizens are telling about specific, itemized questions they have about a conditional use permit. Do you have one?
Sir, with respect, I do, and I agree with all of the things.
Would you get to it,
I agree
please?
with all of the things they've said before.
Thank you.
However, I do feel that I have a right to speak.
Not
Freedom of,
regarding a national level. This is Robert's Rules of Order, and we're discussing a conditional use permit request.
and I'm asking you to deny that conditional
I
use
believe
permit.
that's in order.
Okay, and the reason would be because in very soon, it's very possible that these programs are going to be going away. And we will be investing Pennington County funds and efforts and inconveniencing our landowners and all this type of thing for a program that if the subsidies go away, the program will disappear. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thanks, Charlie. Casey Canupi?
Hi. Do I need 10
Introduce
minutes?
yourself,
Yeah,
please.
my name's Casey Canupi, and I live up by New Underwood. Currently, we have property that borders the Wild Springs solar, so I'm kind of come from that perspective of being a neighbor to that existing project, and actually, we were involved in the negotiation. We could have put land in it. We were involved in some of the negotiations with that also. And something I guess I'm going to speak to that briefly, and just as watching the presentations get placed here and these conversations, and how the company has really great answers for all the concerns brought to them. They seem to have, always have something to come back, and everything sounds like rainbows and butterflies. That was the same things that come to us. It all seems good ahead of time. And then, we fortunately bowed out of that and did not get involved. And I'm not going to say it wasn't tempting. There's a lot of money involved, and as a rancher that deals with commodity prices that fluctuate considerably, to know that you're going to get a consistent check year after year, that is very tempting. But I think we have to look beyond the money here and look at how these things affect everybody else involved. And one of the things that I will say, once the construction process started, it really blew my mind as to how this affects everything and how this affects the environment. Months of moving dirt. Dump trucks going from hauling dirt 2 miles for weeks at a time just to level places out. I have pictures of wind erosion and water erosion. Nothing really incredible, but it does happen, especially through the construction phases of this. Road traffic. And I know they mentioned having 100 employees. And it depending on what time you come through New Underwood, you would see the dozens of cars in the morning and probably more than dozens, there maybe 50 to 100 cars, almost entirely without estate plates, going to work on this project. There was very few local people involved in the construction of this. So as far as that benefit, I didn't see that to any extreme. One of the specific things that I noticed, 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm trying to haul yearlings out, 161st Avenue. People trying to get to school with their kids, they shut down 161st Avenue, which is the main thoroughway going to New Underwood, to unload a crane in the middle of the road. Granted, they have over 1,000 acres rented, and they choose to unload a crane in the middle of the road with very little concern about how that affected anybody else. And I know they're going to say that they're not going to do these things, but you got to take things, with a grain of salt. There was supposed to be no truck traffic through New Underwood. That was all supposed to go down to 44 and up. Considerable amount of truck traffic through New Underwood. Thousands of trucks hauling materials into this project. Very disruptive, very hard to do my job. We have a half section of land that my parents' house is on that has solar solar on two sides, roads on the other two sides, that, considerable traffic. We did not use that land for a year because of this project, because my concern was, we have cattle out there, what's gonna happen? Is there gonna be something that spooks them and whatever? They end up out in this project, that is gonna be, how do I gather cattle out of something that's going on like this? And then am I responsible for any damages that come from that to their project? Because they did not have any exterior fences up at that time. It was just our old, 3-wire, 4-wire fences. At that time, they didn't protect that. The environmental side of it. I know at the meeting in New Underwood, it was kind of talked about considerably about the environmental side of things, hail damage, things like that. How does this stuff get cleaned up? One of the things that wasn't discussed is the thousands of tons of steel that get driven into the ground that are coated with something to keep them from rusting, rotting. What does that do over time? Is there effects of that over time? And I'm going to use kind of an example that's going on right now with the Air Force Base and the use of 20 years ago, the Air Force Base was told that they have firefighting foam that is safe. They use it according to label instructions. Everything is on the up and up. Well, fast forward 20 years, and now there are water wells 20 miles away that are contaminated with this PFAS. And it is costing the taxpayers millions of dollars to clean this up. So how do we know what goes on here can really be cleaned up and what the effects are down the road? I think that's something to keep in mind. Native prairies in this country and in this world are a dying ecosystem. And the amount of them left, I don't know the exact percentage, but it's very minimal anymore. And we're taking this stuff away, and I know they say they will reclaim it, but this will never be, no matter what they do, it will never be the same as it was when they started. It's impossible to reclaim it to its natural state. And I know they mentioned that it doesn't affect animals, and animals can live in there. Well, I've watched deer with normal migrating patterns that were through these solar fields walk out, they come to an 8-foot chain link fence, they wander up and down for a while, like they don't know what's going on, and they leave. This is mowed considerably. That is horrible for bird population and for nesting out in these. It's not, I won't dwell on it, but there's no way they can put it back, and this does definitely negatively affect the environment. And I'll keep this very brief. That was most of it. My point being, the negatives far outweigh the positives of these projects. There will be some money involved. Things will come, great. But as far as the benefits to the community, the benefits to the neighbors, and to the ranching community, overall, this is an overall negative, and I hope you take that into account. And I will mention, I know it was talked about the fences earlier, about who maintains the fences and things like that. The setback fence, from what I understand, and we have not ever got a really clear answer on this, the setback fence that is chain link, they maintain, but from what I take it, the existing property line fences are still maintained by the property owners. We still have to maintain our half. I assume they will maintain their half. We have not really got to that point yet. And then just one other quick point. After the construction started, there were concerns that we had. We addressed some concerns to the Wild Springs, I don't know if that was the name, National Grid, whatever you want to call it. At that time, their response to us was, you bet, we have this document, have a look at it, and hopefully they'll take care of all your concerns. This was a 3 to 4 page legal document that they write us a check, we sign this document, and then this was all the limitations we had of what we could complain about after that. And when I addressed my concern that this wasn't addressing the specific concerns that we had, and I wasn't going to sign it, their response to me was that I was being unreasonable. So that's the deals that you end up with in these situations. So I thank you for your time. I hope I made my point clear. So thank you.
Are there any questions for Casey?
I do have one. Now that this is up and running where you are,
yep.
What are the downsides now that it has been built and everything?
Obviously sight, it's very unsightly. And one thing I will point out, and I should have mentioned this, there is noise to solar. And my parents' house is approximately a quarter of a mile away. And you can, depending on how bright the sun is shining, there is a definite hum that you can hear a quarter of a mile away. And I don't know what exactly
Like
causes.
expansion, contraction, or?
It's a constant hum. Yeah, and there's look like shipping containers out there where that stuff gathers up. I don't know what causes it, but there is a definite, and if the wind's right, you can hear a noise too from them, it kind of whistles through them and things. But there is a definite hum to that, to those. Other negatives, and I don't want this to, I think the people that work there, they're just doing their jobs. They got a job, they're doing it. Was it anything against us? No, but the project in general is, I guess, what concerns me. And then, and what'll come down the road from environmental impacts is kind of my big concern, I guess, as far as that goes, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Paul Scorsa?
I'll be quick. Mine's just simpler. We're trying to build a house and to the planning commission. Anyway, to get a continuous use permit to live in our garage, we had to get a signed thing from 3 of our neighbors, which, as I understand, neither one of them could stop us from getting that. This, a lot of people in here are against, and it was no problem because I know my neighbors. That's part of my point. We don't know these people enough about them, and I ask that you do not get the permit. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speaker request forms I have. Is there anyone else in the audience that wanted to speak?
Yeah, my name's Burl Barber. I live down in the New Underwood area. And some of this, I didn't even know about the 26th meeting that they had. So it's kind of, they didn't really get that message out as far as I was concerned as to when to get there. And the only time we really knew was when Justin stood up in church and said, hey, this is going on tomorrow. Okay, I'll be there. So their lack of communication with the community, I think, was really lacking to let people know what was going on and what's going on in the future. The other, I retired from the power company. I'm not an expert on it, but most of this power is not going to serve New Underwood. They mentioned New Underwood a lot. New Underwood's going to be first. New Underwood's 600 people. We're not going to use that much power. We're not going to use the power from the solar that's there now. We're not going to use the power from the solar that's there. They're going to build transmission lines to ship that power to California and all the big cities. We're going to deal with the ugliness of it and all the side effects, and the big cities are going to get the prospered. You don't want that in your backyard. You don't want it in your backyard. I don't want it in my backyard. It doesn't benefit me. It doesn't benefit South Dakota in very much degree, because most of I got power lines coming across my line now, my land that comes from Pierre, and then it goes up to Montana. So I got an idea how this is going to work. And so the big point, it doesn't benefit us in the rural community. And it's going elsewhere. And I did have one other question. That in the reclamation, they talked about the metal, the aluminum. Well, that doesn't make the electricity in the solar panels. I'm no expert on it, but something else has to absorb that sun and make it into electricity. And I seen a deal on the Fox News one time about a hailstorm that went through Texas, and it just demolished a solar farm, and all the stuff was leaching off into the soil. I mean, that is a concern, because I did hear some stuff about, well, they can take the whole solar thing back and restored or whatever, but if you have a major hailstorm, which we did about 4 years ago, big hailstorms, I mean, it could wipe out that whole solar farm. What's gonna happen to that, when that glass gets crushed? What's behind that glass? I don't know. Is it gonna go in the ground, then it's gonna leach out? I mean, Casey mentioned the stuff from the base. I mean, I live right next to Casey. We bought the place right south of me because it had that chemical in it. If that chemical's come out of that solar panel, where's it gonna go? It's gonna go into Box Elder Creek. It's gonna distribute out into all the wells. I mean, I just don't think it's a good idea. I think we need to have more research, and Nuwandowit doesn't benefit from it. We're gonna have to put up with it if it goes through, but we're not gonna benefit from it hardly at all. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning or afternoon, whichever it is now. My name is John Henderson. I live south of Hill City. I represent a family partnership. We own property out in that area. I guess I've heard enough. All the other questions I had have pretty much been gone over. I only have one request, and that is to remind you guys that this is not a continual use permit for a grain silo being made into a tiny house. This is a major, major thing, and I trust your judgment and that you will do your jobs diligently. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, comments, questions, discussion?
Chair, just an observation. How many people went out to the site to look and see where the solar panels or just where the turbines would go and the layout of what's going to happen out there, or even went to Wild Springs at this point just to ask questions and to kind of see what the people of the community have concerns about? I think it's something that this board should experience and should see for themselves for just for the use of and for the issue that you can kind of see what people are talking about and just see what a solar plant is run and how it's run and the questions you are needed to ask or the answers that you need to know before you approve this. It makes a lot of sense when, again, I went out there twice and I didn't get all the answers right away. And the second time it just brought more questions because there's a lot of areas on this for benefits, the environmental impacts, it is appropriate site. This is a hybrid project. It's a little bit different than just solar and my concerns of the upgrade. I mean, some of those things have been answered. And then I think you could come back and then ask the appropriate questions once you see some of what the community is telling you. It's not like we all don't know some of this because we've been here before, but it's nice to see the area in which it's going to be put and explained by the owners, hopefully, in a way that we have an understanding where the transmission's line, where the road's going. It makes a huge difference, at least for me, to make a good decision and informed decision about what I'm going to do with a project.
Madam Chair? I think that's excellent, Deb. I agree with you. On Wild Springs, I had the opportunity during their process, conditional use, and then during their construction process, because I had some concerns about that. And one of the gentlemen that came up here talked about employees. I already was aware that they used an out-of-state contractor for that project and checked them out, and they were an excellent contractor. So actually, I felt better about it having seen it. I agree with you. I think as a commissioner, before I vote on it, I'd like to have the same opportunity on this project to do that, which is going to take a continuance. And I don't know, you folks all come here and it takes a lot of time out of your day, but sometimes to make these things and look at them, I did use a crazy example, but there are people that do have vacation home rentals in grain silos. But I think this is important enough. I'd like to walk through it and put my foot down on the soil, but I don't know about the rest of the commission.
Just a suggestion, only because it brings more questions to your mind, and then I went and looked up more stuff that were the concerns of the community, the land use, and then once I talked to the Wild Spring representative, very informational, and then I had more questions after. It kind of shows you what that presentation should look like, what that site should look like, and then do a site visit on the other one, so Lenny and Mr. Mark Tivitt could explain this is what's happening, because they showed us the connection parts, how many connections there was to the inverter, to the substation, where the substation went, and that way you had a broad picture, and also to be able to answer people's questions, or answer people's questions about what they're saying about the site, or just new generation, and then just see what it looks like, and what you're gonna be approving for the future of those areas, and how many, I agree, is it appropriate site, and how many do we decide that we want out in that area? So, just food for thought.
One of my concerns, I guess my primary concern, is how does this benefit the community? You know, we all get proposals. We've got some initiated measures coming up now where they promise us the taxes are going to benefit us. I mean, how many remember what the taxes benefited us from the video lottery? Did anybody remember how much our taxes improved from that? So I'm not so interested in what we see from there, but I take heed of what the people that live around there, what the community thinks about this project, and I appreciated all your concerns. And I think, along with Charlie, I'd like to do a tour out there, take a look at it.
Yeah, Michael?
Since the last meeting, I've thought a lot about this. I don't like the looks of turbines. I've been through Iowa and places at night, flashing and the props going. No, I don't like them. There's two things here. There's the emotional side and there's the legal side. The emotional side in me says no. No way. I don't think it should be done. The problem is, do we have the legal right to say no as a commission? That's where the problem comes in. If we say no, these people may have the right to turn around and sue us because we said no. That's the thing that bothers me. So I'm very conflicted on this whole thing. It's a yin-yang. I can see both sides of this thing. If I lived out there, I know what my thoughts would be, but legally, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Brittany, our legal counsel is not here, is he? Is he in the audience?
He's next door.
Okay, maybe we need some information on that.
So I have something. So Jerry brought up a good point, is it site appropriate? It's not like, are we against new generation green energy? Or are we against the appropriate site and using basically our comprehensive plan to make that choice of, is it site appropriate? Because that's what we're doing, is we're asking ourselves, is it site appropriate with a conditional use permit? But I'll let your
Question is, if we deny this, do we have the right to deny it as a planning commission if they've met whatever requirements that the planning department has set out for them?
Tyler Sobzak, State's Attorney's Office. I would rather have this conversation in an executive session. It just appears that there's a lot of, I don't want to construe what would be private legal advice, without having a nice, back and forth conversation with you folks about what a decision like that could look like, what the ramifications are, maybe go through the comp plan and the ordinance. But at this time, I don't think that recommendation right here would be in this commission's best interest. So I hope that is well taken at least.
Okay.
Anything else at this point?
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
You know how I get in trouble with the attorneys all the time, right? I figure, and you guys ought to believe the same thing. Anybody can sue you for anything at any time. I guarantee it. Somebody will take the case. So I don't look at that. We're talking about working together, and I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, who you are. We've got to work together to get it done and get it done right. So I agree with you, and I don't worry about, in fact, that's why they pay you your little bit of stipend, so that they're protecting you if you did get sued personally. That's what they're doing.
Yep.
So it's covered. I'm going to move we continue it and that we get a designation of through Brittany's office, which would be appropriate, so that we can visit this site. We all have lists of citizens' questions and neighbors' questions, and begin to address some of these in our own mind before we look at whether it meets the guidelines of the conditional use permit or not. So my motion would be that we continue it with guidance through your office for visitation.
I would just,
We got to have a second before you can talk.
I would second that.
Just 1 second, we need to have separate votes on 11 and 12.
Correct, and I'll do this, let's do 11 first.
Okay.
All right,
That's-
that's my motion on number 11. Obviously, it's going to be the same for number 12. Go ahead.
Brittany Molitor, Planning Director. I just want to caution that if you guys are going to go on a site visit and there's more than 3 of you, it's a quorum, it has to be publicly noticed, and everything. So if that's going to be the case, then we would probably have to set up a time and make a meeting time that Jerry can notice.
I believe Well Springs did that. They separated us, so we weren't down there.
Right, but I just want to make sure that you're aware.
Right. I'm aware of that. Thank you for reminding me, though.
Okay, so we have a motion. Did we have a second on that?
Yes, second.
A second, okay.
Do you have a continuation date?
I would like it to happen within the next 30 days. Can I include that in my motion
I would
second?
think.
Like October 14th or October
That we have it
28th?
planned out within the next 30 days, so the property owners as well as the company knows what our next step forward is.
So October 14th for a continuation?
That would be fine with me.
Okay.
We can't do that within the next 2 weeks?
I don't care. If we can do it 2 weeks,
Yeah.
go ahead and throw your shoe in the
The Monday, or we have planning commission when, the 20,
It's September 23rd.
I was thinking though, Deb, we gotta separate them. I remember that we can't all be on the site on the same visit. We have to drive out there
Well, if
individually.
there's notice.
if there's
there, we
notification,
can.
you can, Charlie.
Oh,
You can have as many
notification.
of us as you need, just so it's publicly noticed.
Oh, I see. As long as it's published.
Yep,
I didn't know that.
yep.
Okay. They just opted not to do it that way when they did it, apparently.
Right, but that's what I was saying, that as long as we publicly notice and it's noticed in the paper, then as many can be there. It's a public meeting, the public can be there as well as the commissioners.
Okay.
So how long is the
I would
notice?
include that in the motion, 2 weeks then, that we have it lined out. Madam Chair, I'll change it then, I'll drop the 30 days, but I would like the visitation, and I'd like it planned out within a 2-week period so we know where we're at. Correct? And then you gotta publish it, correct?
I believe it has to be noticed 10 days prior.
10?
So we need to stick with October
My third, we
14th.
back to 30 days. Okay, 30 days, leave it.
Okay, October 14th.
I'm just trying to expedite it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, discussion, I forgot discussion, I'm sorry.
Discussion. Let me ask one thing. What about an executive session with our legal counsel to be included in this?
I would say after we visit.
Yeah,
Okay? I think it should be.
All right.
Yeah, okay.
okay.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
I just second.
Oh,
You're allowed
Rush here, aren't you? I would just like to make the comment, we're in the second inning, as was discussed before. I think, I'm mixed on either way, but I think every time that we get together, we probably have a few more answers, we have a few more concerns, that I think that it's a good move to put this off for a little bit. But I am a firm believer that every time we get together, we learn a few different things. And again, being in the second inning, we can spend a little time and make sure that the third and fourth innings are productive. So that's all I have to say.
And the meeting time's not gonna work. The 14th is a date that, what'd you say?
Native Americans Day.
Native American Day is the 14th.
So we don't have.
You had a
meeting then?
question?
It'll be the 16th, Karen. October 16th would be the date.
Oh, 16th?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Did I understand you right? If this is a published meeting, the public can attend this as well?
If it's published,
So
yes.
we can attend this site visit that will be going to Wild Springs and the Eurotech? Is that
I
what we're
don't think
asking?
it was Wild Springs, I think it
No,
was just
it wasn't
Eurotech.
including Wellspring.
So just the Eurotech site, but the public is welcome to attend this as well?
If it's
because a public
advertised.
event. Okay, thank you.
I also wanted to leave under discussion, I wanted to leave these folks time to review with their owner and see whether they want to go through this process.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. Obviously, we want to do whatever you think is important to get to the third and fourth innings. I want to clarify, there's some comments made about the landowner and their background and their operations in other parts of the state. They wouldn't be operating the solar plant. That's not what they do. We are leasing land. There was a property rights discussion. We're leasing land from a landowner, and you can ask yourselves whether he should have that right to lease land to us for this purpose. But from an operational standpoint, they would not be involved at all. Obviously, from a coordination site visit, they'd be very involved, and so would we. And we'd want to, work together with Brittany and Jason to figure out the most enlightened way where you can optimize your time and see everything along the perimeter and the interconnection and drive along the road from 44 up to that. And then the other questions that you asked, Commissioner Santana, about what's the benefit to the community. We're probably not the best address. We can make a commitment. I know the folks at Wild Springs made a community engagement commitment. We'll make that commitment as well. But the bigger number, obviously, are the tax revenues, and they're significant. And that's up to the county to decide how they want to allocate that according to needs. But regarding your question, from a coordination standpoint, yes, we're here and we will accommodate whatever scheduling works best for all of you.
That would be my point on the motion, is that you coordinate seamlessly with the department so we're ready to go, and the questions we have and whatever.
Absolutely.
Dog and pony show like you expect.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? This is to continue to October 16th, and also we'll be coordinating a site visit, which isn't part of the motion, is it? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Madam Chair, I would propose the same motion for business item number 12. Yes.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Continued.
What did you say?
That's what I heard. I didn't.
We have executive session on the
That's what I understand.
on the agenda. Is that something we want to try to have today, or do we know what we even want to ask our legal counsel?
It's up to you if you want to have it today or if you want to have it, that discussion another.
Madam Chair, I'd rather see it after our visit,
Okay.
if that's all right with the rest of the members.
Then we could have it next meeting. Okay. County Board report?
The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendations from the August 26th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Could you guys take your conversations out into the hall?
But thank all of you.
Thank you for coming.
Jeez, yes.
Thank you for the input.
Did you tell them about the update on the variance that we disapproved, meaning we didn't approve with the drainage on Rains, and then the commission agreed that the drainage needed to be done? I don't know if you guys knew that.
Oh, items from the membership.
Oh, sorry.
Out of line. Okay, items from the public? I think the public is leaving, so.
Is for
Items from staff.
Just the building permit report, I just want to make comment that the Apple Valley subdivision has started plating, so they are issuing or submitting about 20 single-family residence permits
Wow.
at a time. So you're going to start seeing that uptick in that, in the building permit reports. So that's what that's from.
Items for membership.
I just wanted to remind you, I'll miss the next meeting. I'm on vacation.
Okay.
About the,
Yes, what Deb was speaking of having the planning commission as the board of adjustment. The board of commissioners made the decision to keep the board of adjustment at their level. And then also looking at a drainage plan and a drainage commission.
and that we upheld the drainage issue on Mr. Rain's property.
Yes.
Based on this board's decision, we upheld that through, he wanted a variance not to do the drainage on his property, and he has to do the drainage, so.
Right. It was based on this board's approval of the conditional use permit.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask that we, after the ordinance we just approved, after the commissioners approve it and it's published, could we get an updated zoning ordinance? My last one was
Hard copy.
December of 2023, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have one that's June 2024.
Yeah.
They gave me.
You and I.
We've had several ordinance
I would
amendments lately.
like to have a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?